Okay, I'd like to call the Physician Assistant Board to order, please. Today is August 11th. We are meeting at the Sheraton San Diego. The first item on the agenda will be roll call. Julie?
Charles Alexander.
Present.
Jennifer Carlquist.
Present.
Sonia Early.
Present.
Javier Escobar Acosta.
Present.
Jed Grant.
Present.
Catherine Hazelton.
Here.
Xavier Martinez.
Here.
Robert Sachs.
Present.
Mary Valencia.
Present.
Okay, we have a quorum. Before we go to approval of the minutes, I would appreciate it if each board member would introduce themselves to our public that's here today. Xavier?
Good morning. My name is Xavier Martinez, and I'm a public member.
Sonia Early, Physician Assistant.
Jennifer Carlquist, Physician Assistant.
Jed Grant, license member.
Bob Sachs, PA.
Charles Alexander, I'm a public member.
Javier Esquivel Acosta, PA.
Mary Bedrosian Valencia, public member.
Catherine Hazelton, public member. Welcome to you all.
Very good. Thank you very much. Next item will be approval of the April 24th meeting minutes. Duh. I can't read this.
I have a correction to the minutes.
Okay.
Line 623, where we talk about honorably discharged veterans, there's a typo. Should not say honorary veterans, but honorably discharged veterans. We could make that correction.
Okay. Are there any other changes in the agenda? Sorry, minutes.
That was the only thing I said.
Do I have a motion to accept the minutes
With the amendment.
with the amendment?
I make a motion to.
Okay. All those in favor say, oh, no, I
I'll
have to call
second.
it, don't I?
I'll second the motion.
Second, please.
I'll second.
Okay. We'll call the vote as soon as I can find my... Where's your cheat sheet go? We're more organized than this usual. I just need to... Okay. Charles Alexander,
Aye.
Jennifer Carlquist,
Aye.
Sonia Early,
Aye.
Xavier Escobar Acosta,
Aye.
Jed Grant,
Aye.
Catherine Hazelton,
Aye.
Xavier Martinez,
Aye.
Robert Sachs, aye. Mary Valencia.
Aye.
Okay. Next item of business is public comment. Items not on the agenda. The board may not discuss or take action on any matter raised during public comment section. This is not that is not included on this agenda, except to decide whether to place the matter on an agenda for future meeting. Is there any public comment at this time? Okay. Seeing none, we will move to item number 4, which is President's Report. And I think everybody has a copy. Recently, there was a Supreme Court decision in the state of Pennsylvania, which had to do with informed consent. It was regarding a neurosurgical patient and a neurosurgical PA. As a result of that Supreme Court decision, it was decided that the only individual that can give informed consent in Pennsylvania is a physician. So we're discussing it because it is obviously, in my opinion, a precedenting case as far as if we have an action in California or any other states, they're going to obviously look at the Pennsylvania decision. I'll defer to legal for a minute. Can't pull it any closer.
Well, I'll try to lean forward. So I have to respectfully disagree.
Okay.
California courts don't follow other courts' decisions necessarily. And I think that because this is interpreting Pennsylvania law with respect to their statutes, it's not applicable to California. So, I mean, it's interesting to discuss, I think, you know, and you can certainly watch it to see if there's any trends that occur over, you know, through other states. But, you know, this has no legal effect on our interpretation of law under California jurisdiction, so, in my opinion.
Okay. Any comment from board members? Public comment? All right, we will go on to executive officer report.
Good morning, everybody. First of all, I would like to give you a staff update. Rosanna Verdos came to us from the medical board. She is our new enforcement coordinator. So we are very pleased to have her. This is the first time since 2013 that we have been fully staffed. So we're still working on a huge backlog. And I would really like to thank Julie for getting this meeting put together with the hotel and all the reservations. It's not an easy job to do, and she is phenomenal. I'm going to give a very quick budget update. We don't have month 13 figures in yet. That's going to be in another couple of weeks. So we'll know our final bottom line as far as what we spent last year. But for month 12, we actually ended up with a 4.2% to the good. So even though we had some extremely high investigative and AG costs, we still managed to keep within line. So thank you.
Maybe we should tell them how much we spend on investigation to the public.
What do you mean? Oh, hold on. Yeah, I can do that. Bob just brought up a good point, and for the public members that are here, our investigative costs, which are done by the Medical Board of California for us, this year we spent almost $144,000 just in investigations. Well, obviously the AG's, where's my AG line? Our AG cost this year was $480,000. So you can see with the number of complaints that we're getting and the complexity that these costs are going up, and that with the more PAs that are being licensed by our board, this is going to continue to rise, and it will continue to be an issue with us. Any questions?
I have a quick question. Do we anticipate receiving more funds to pay off that increase in the near future?
I would hope so.
Did the BCP get filed?
They're working on BCPs.
Okay.
But there is a planned BCP.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. Next item will be licensing program activity report. Julie? Where's Julie?
She's right there.
I can't see that.
Apologies. To be honest with you, I am at the age that I'm beginning to need to wear reader glasses, and this type is so small. So if Lynn, if you could read that for me, that would be very helpful.
Okay, hold on, let me get to it.
It's 5C.
I thought it was just my eyes.
Pass them around, no.
I'm glad you said that.
We switched gears with how our reports are being ran.
Yeah.
And so it's a little small when I opened it up. Yeah.
I think I have an extra paper.
It is small, my
So between,
goodness.
I think I can make out between April 10th, 2017 and July 28th, 2017, and we ran this report on July 28th, we've received 415 applications. Applications approved are 328, and renewed is 1,564. And then Licenses issued is 328. Much better. Year-to-date licenses. We have current licenses of 11,581. Inactive is 38. And family support is, I believe it says 2. Current probation is 3. Family support is 2. And so we have delinquent licenses also, which there's many factors that can be delinquent. People can be taking time off to spend with their families. They can be out of state. They can just decide that they're going to retire, and because we don't have the retired status as of yet, then they just opt out to have their licenses go delinquent.
Okay.
Yeah.
Questions?
Well, just for clarification, so the family support is for those people that have not paid their child support?
Correct.
And their licenses are
Mhm.
suspended until they pay that child support, and if they don't pay it, they're revoked.
They're given a temporary short license, so they're
Right.
allowed to work for 6-month increments. And then, so they have a renewal cycle, but their license card is only valid for a shorter time.
Okay.
So they do have to check back in with family support to extend that, is my understanding.
Okay.
So yes.
Thank you, Julie. Don't go too far. Diversion program activity.
She can read that.
Julie's wearing multiple hats.
That's okay. So, as of June 1st, 2017, we have 4 voluntary referrals, 13 board referrals, and total number of participants is 17. Questions on that?
Yeah, that's fine. Any questions on the diversion activity? Public comment? Okay, thank you. Can we do that one now?
You forgot enforcement.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought we did it.
No.
Okay, we will go to enforcement activity, please.
Rosanna.
I'm out of it today.
Good morning. I'm Rosanna. As of July 1st, 2017 to June 30th, 2017, we placed 6 licensees on probation. We issued 1 public letter of reprimand. There was 2 licenses that were surrendered. There was 2 probationary licenses that were issued. There was 1 cease practice order that was issued. Accusations, there were 11 accusations filed. There was 2 interim suspension orders that were issued. Cases initiated at the AG's office were 6, and then currently we have 51 pending AG cases. Citation and fines from the previous fiscal year, we had 2 pending. Fines due from previous fiscal year is $500. We issued 3 citations. 1 closed since we received the payment, the fines. Pending so far is 2. The initial fines issued were $750. Fines received is $250, so we still have $500 outstanding. Current probationers, we currently have 51 active probationers and 7 are told. Total complaints received is 99. Closed without investigation is 1, and assigned for investigation is 112. Any questions?
I have a question.
Yes.
The 99 complaints, in what time frame? Since our last meeting, or is that?
Yes, since April 1st to June 30th.
Wow. So we're getting like 30 complaints a month, maybe
It's
almost
a lot
one a
of
day.
online complaints that we are receiving, so.
Is that more than usual?
I just started as of May, but, I mean, it seems excessive.
Sonia, it's a lot, but with more and more people becoming used to the website, there are finally more complaints on the website, and some of them are very minute, do I want to say? But that's how we're getting a lot of them.
Okay.
So, if I could follow up on that question. If a complaint comes in, is there any pre-screening done? You say some are minute, or maybe they're completely, at least at face value, without merit. Is there anybody that does an initial screening on those to decide which ones go to investigation? Because looking at our investigative costs, it would seem to kind of make sense to sort
When the
them out.
complaint, MedBoard does all of our complaints. So we have an analyst over there who takes an initial review of the complaint, looks at it, decides what it is. She will then give it to me with her recommendation, and it can either be closed with no merit, it can go to a medical consultant for further review. When it comes back, that's when the determination is if it goes to the field or not. So, yeah, there's another layer.
Is there a trend in the complaints as far as what are they complaining about?
Overprescribing,
Yeah.
negligence, so,
Over-prescribing?
overprescribing.
How many cases would you say are related to overprescribing out of the 99? What
Most of
majority?
the, like I said, like Glenn said, cases first, I mean, when the complaints come in, there's an analyst at CCU. She reviews it, makes her determination, goes to Lynn. So that's the first initial step. So I'm not that, in that,
She's learning.
yeah, I'm not in that part, yeah.
You're doing a great job.
Thank you.
I have a question. Out of the 51 pending cases, is that already part of the cost that we've been charged for, or is these going to be costs
You
coming
mean our
in?
active probationers? That's 51?
Yeah, it says pending cases, Office of Attorney
Oh,
General
Pending
pending
cases.
cases, I'm sorry. Okay. That would be part of, the investigation would be completed prior to it going to the AG, so yes.
So those costs are already in this budget line?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
It might be helpful, and I'm not sure what the rest of the board thinks about it, but to have some trending in terms of
Yeah.
public protection, to know what things the public seems to be complaining about the most, or the greatest concern of the public, so that we might address that.
Okay.
I totally agree.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I agree too. I was also curious about the number of people on probation in terms of, is that going up as a result of these investigations?
It is.
It is?
Oh, yeah, very definitely.
Okay. But again, it'd be good to see the trend data, or at least quarter to quarter,
Right.
Okay.
to get some sense of.
Okay.
We have some new reports that are being formatted currently. We're switching to a new system. So and enforcement obviously is the most complex of all that we do. So they're having a little bit of a problem getting the reports in line to the way they want them. So we're hoping that within the next quarter that they will be more presentable to you guys and give you the breakdowns that you're looking for.
Okay, great, thank you.
Okay?
Will, in that new light?
Yes, it will. Yes, I'm way ahead of you. Yes, it is. Rosanna and I talked about it this week, and that's one of the things that she's going to be working on and seeing if she can't get it developed.
Super. For the public out there, we used to have the ability to see how long our investigations were aging. It actually put a day count on it, and any that were over, I think, 360 days got looked at even more closely so that we knew why that was taking so long. A lot of times it's evidence. A few times it was because there was a criminal investigation going on, which kind of takes precedence over ours. We have to wait till that decision is made. We haven't been able to have that ability, but that's what they're now working on, to start processing that information. Okay, anything more on enforcement? Public comment? Okay, thank you, Rosanna.
Thank you.
Moving a little out of sync. Can I go to 8?
Yes.
Okay, I'd like to go to item number 8, which is discussion and possible action amending Title 16 of the California Code of Regulations, 1399-507, and the title of it is Examination Required, and what is being proposed to at least discuss is an additional certifying national agency. This came about because at last year's CAPA conference, the American Academy of Physician Assistants president basically stated that the American Academy was going to start exploring creating a new certifying organization to basically remove the monopoly that the National Commission of Certifying has. And so we put this on the agenda, not really knowing where all that was going. We have since found out that I guess APA is not going to pursue it. They are in discussions with the National Commission of Certification. But I just wanted to put it on the agenda for members to look at, think about, and I'd be very interested in comments from the members on the board, if any.
I'm never afraid to comment, unfortunately. I think it's a good idea. Anything that gives us more flexibility. I think the NCCPA is, I'm glad that they're working with the AAPA and listening to the professional organizations, but I think in terms of us, if we have some room to move in our regulations, if something like that does happen in the future, I think that's a good thing. Being stuck with only one option could cause problems in the future, even if this does get resolved and there's only ever one certifying organization. It gives us, flexibility in case something changes. So I would be in favor of changing the language.
Okay.
I would have to agree as well. In years past, we had CAHIA, and so to give us a little bit more flexibility in terms of not having a monopoly on just one certifying body, that would be great. So I am open to changing or helping to change that ruling.
Okay. Further comment? Christy?
So the way that the statutory and regulatory processes work together is you have a statute that gives you a grant of general authority to do something. So under current law, 3517 of the Business and Professions Code, the law requires you to set an examination, and the examination has to be under a uniform examination system. And then you have a regulation that explains which examination that you've designated as the examination that needs to be taken. So the criteria for adopting regulations includes meeting a standard called the necessity standard. And so you need to be able to demonstrate that there's a necessary, that you need to meet a requirement that's currently in existence. So the problem that I'm seeing with this type of language proposal change is that there's really no necessity at this point because there's not another examination that you can designate at this point. So I kind of like to explain it this way. Statutes are kind of like, you have the authority, for instance, to make a cake, and the regulations are the recipe. So you couldn't put a recipe book together that said, there's no recipe at this time, come back later. It really wouldn't serve any useful purpose. And so because there's no, it doesn't add anything to your current authority to put in or other national examination in the language, if you amended it that way.
Are we talking about examination or examination body? Accrediting body?
Either one,
Okay.
because there isn't another body right now. And that's the problem. There's only the National Commission on Certification of Physician Assistants. They're the only body that's developed an examination. And with examinations, you have to meet certain legal requirements in California, one of which that it's valid. And it's validated through what they call a psychometrician. A psychometrician evaluates the examination to demonstrate that it's legally defensible. And there's a requirement in the Business and Professions Code that all of your professional examinations have to meet that requirement. So in order to adopt a regulation that says there's another examination, you have to first have another examination and B, have an examination that's been validated. And since there isn't any certifying body that has an examination other than this one, I don't see, I think there's a strong likelihood that it will not be approved to go forward. So my recommendation at this time is sort of keep it on staff's radar, and if there is an examination developed or that you hear that there's going to be one released, you can start working towards that at that point and put it on the agenda for board action. But at this point, I think it's premature to amend the regulatory language that exists at 1399.507.
Thank you.
Further board comment? Public comment? Gay, and then please come to the microphone.
Hi, Gay Freeman with California Academy of PAs. We agree with what Jed had said. There is a need to get this done now to protect consumers and to protect PAs that are licensed by this board. If something did happen, if NCCPA went out of business or NCCPA made some very restrictive rule, licensees would be left with nothing. So to have something as a backup, ready on the go, it takes a long time, as we all know. There's a lot of regulations that are sitting on this agenda today that haven't been acted upon. So why not get it ready, beyond the ready, in case something does happen and everybody's protected?
Okay, thank you.
Good morning.
Good
I'm
morning.
Dennis Hendrick. I'm a psychiatric PA, CAQ Psychiatry in Northern California in Mount Shasta. I really agree with Gay's comments. I'm interested that there be a backup plan. I was on the volunteer advisory committee to the NCCPA for a year, and they are really out of touch. They didn't know that there was a PA program that involved teaching NPs and PAs together, and I'm a graduate of UC Davis. They had no idea that existed because they wanted to try to tell me while I was on that committee that there's a vast difference between nurse practitioners and PAs, and they were my classmates. There's not a vast difference. I graduated with them. So I'm interested in having another plan in the chamber ready to go. Thank you.
Thank you. Further public comment?
My name is Brian O'Bannon. I'm a PA licensee, a former board member. It definitely seems like there's some room for growth here, and it's a challenge to find a new organization. It doesn't seem like there's one on the radar screen unless somebody can bring that forth. And I strongly would encourage us to look and try to cultivate that in our local organizations within California, and not to mention the AAPA. Thank you.
Thank you. More public comment.
That's good.
Good morning, Teresa
Good morning.
Anderson with Kappa. So in B&B code, it says may. Would that indicate permissive language on that?
Right, but I mean, if are you talking about 3517?
Yeah.
It says the board shall require a written examination of physician assistants in the manner and under the rules and regulations as it shall prescribe. And then it goes on to say, it may be required under a uniform examination system. I think the B&P code section on validation is, I think, in 139 of the Business and Professions Code. I'd have to double check that number, but all the examinations in the department have to go through a rigorous validation process, including it being evaluated by a psychometrician and found to be sound. So that is part of the criteria. And so, like I said, there is no other examination in existence right now. So you couldn't, and from my perspective, adopt a regulation that says there is when there isn't one, and you couldn't actually designate a placeholder. What you have right now in 3517 of the Business and Professions Code is a general grant of authority to do that designation. So you can do that at any time. And if it was an emergency situation, there's power to adopt emergency regulations that are effective, I believe, within 10 days after you file it with the Office of Administrative Law. So there's processes in place for getting things in place quickly. Another option you could think about, I don't know if you're interested in, is you could develop your own exam. Now that would be expensive, it'd be expensive, and other boards have done it. Board of Behavioral Sciences is an example, but it's quite expensive, as you know. But there are options, so I don't want people to think that if something happened with this other certifying body that somehow you couldn't put another exam together or get something in place. There are legal options for doing that. I think my advice is that until you have that plan, of concrete plan that you can point to, I believe you'd have very difficult time getting a placeholder regulation approved by the administration, so.
In the code, it says that the committee may make those arrangements with organizations furnishing the examination. If the second examination, let's say it was a national examination, met those criteria, would that still qualify under that letter of the law? Because it doesn't specify NCCPA.
No, it doesn't. I mean, you could designate other organizations. I don't think there's a limitation for the board
So in
to
current law,
designate.
would you think that that would meet the requirements if that met requirements that are established currently?
I'm not sure I understand the question.
So, where you said that it has to go through specific criteria, meet specific criteria.
Right.
If that met those criteria, would that fall under that umbrella?
Well, the board would have to take a look at the examination and see whether it thought it met their needs for validating people's competency to practice at the minimum level. So once that review was done by this board, they certainly could move forward with a regulatory proposal that would include or substitute that new examination for the one that's currently in regulation.
So if I could just clarify something, because I'm a little bit confused. If I'm understanding this correctly, when we look at 1399.507 and the underlying BMP code, basically we are saying that we are accepting the NCCPA as the organization that gives a test that later on we are accepting the psychometric data for, which we vote on every year, that we're going to accept that psychometric data.
Right.
What I am asking or hoping for with the change to this is not a change in the test. I don't want a different test or anything else. What I'm thinking that at least I would like to see happen is the organization, not the specific test. If there's another organization that offers an examination, of course at that time we would look at the examination and the psychometric data and make sure it's valid. The concern is that we have only one organization that has a monopoly, that has inordinate amount of control over our state and licensees and how we're practicing medicine. And it would be good, even though there's no one else that does it right now, if another organization does develop that offers an examination, it would be nice to be able to take a look at that. Because the way I'm reading this right now, if I understand correctly, the only organization that we're recognizing is NCCPA. So all we're doing is opening the door to say if there's another organization, we will also look at their test and evaluate its psychometric viability.
Right, so I don't think that this regulation would preclude you from exploring that other option. There is a provision in the Open Meeting Act that allows you to have a closed session discussion about examinations. So if you find another examination that you think you might meet your needs, you could certainly have a board meeting in closed session to talk about that option and look at what the psychometricians have uncovered with respect to that. That's done, it's done all the time.
But
So I don't think you need to make a regulatory change to have that option. What I'm concerned about is amending the language to state or any other national certifying agency approved by the board. There isn't another certifying agency. There is no other examination. So you wouldn't meet the necessity standard required by regulations adopted by the Office of Administrative Law, and there would be a clarity problem because people would be confused and misled into believing that there's another pathway besides the NCCPA's examination when in fact there is not. So I think that under those two standards, you probably would not get a regulatory change through at this time. But if an examination develops and you meet and confer about what examination options there are available to you, and you decide you want to move forward with that new examination, that would be the time to change this regulation. And if it required an emergency change, you could seek an emergency change to your regulations to implement that. It's just not available in my view at this time because there isn't another exam.
So the B&P code authorizes basically an organization that has met those standards.
Correct.
In the regulations, it's organization specific. So
Right, I was trying to kind of give an analogy, and I don't know if it fell apart, but, you know, the statute is the skeleton, the regulation is the meat on the bones.
Right.
And so you have to have something specific. Regulations cannot be general, they cannot be vague, they cannot be unclear, they cannot be uncertain. And since we are at an uncertainty point where we don't know whether there's going to be another examination, it would fail, because unlike a statute that can be vague and broad, regulations cannot be. And so that's why I'm saying you have a general grant of authority in statute. It's just that right now you don't have another exam to point to that you could amend your regulations to conform it to. But it doesn't preclude this board from talking about it and researching it and holding closed session meetings to examine an examination that's been brought forward for consideration. So you can do all that prep work. There's nothing in law that precludes you from doing that. But I don't think you can amend the regulation to recognize an examination that doesn't exist.
You keep saying recognize an examination.
Right.
I don't think we're trying to recognize another examination. We're trying to recognize another organization which may or may not offer an examination.
Well, that's already available in 3517. You can pick any organization you'd like once it's available. And that's my point. There's not another organization available at this point. When that happens, you can look at amending your regulation.
it seems like perhaps this was flawed in its original draft with specifying one organization versus an examination. So hypothetically speaking, what would happen if NCCPA was gone tomorrow? And you know, is the test then, or the exam then invalid? I mean, how does that work if there is, I guess we're subject to one organization right now. And I get that only one exists, but
right.
It just seems that it's so specific that if another organization wanted to offer the exam, then they're limited by regulations in California.
Well, the idea for regulation is that it's specific. It has to be. That's the job of a regulation, to be specific.
For the examination.
It is the examination. It says the written examination for licensure is that administered by the NCCPA. And the reason why it's written like that is so that the name of the exams change from time to time, over time. So it was written broadly like that to recognize the entity that provides the exam, because they're the only ones that provide one, and then if they change the name of their examinations, it doesn't matter over time. That's why it's written like that.
Can I
So in
add?
any event, I don't know how to explain it any more clearly, but.
Oh, no, I get it. And I get the emergency reg process, so if that's
Right.
the only option, I get it.
Right.
Can I go backwards and just say, can we change the language to say the written examination for the licensure as a physician assistant, is that administered by a board-approved entity, and then go from there? Can we marry it to the BMP code? Can we leave it?
No, the goal of a regulation is to be specific.
Okay.
And if you make it more unclear and vague, you will get, your likelihood of it getting disapproved by the administration and by the Office of Administrative Law is high.
And I think.
So I think once you get that exam or that other organization and it's available, that's when you should start working on amending your regulation. I think it's just premature at this point.
And I don't think the intent is to go general. I mean, everybody knows the exam is the exam, and it's very, very difficult. So I don't think it's to change the exam. And I totally get what you're saying, but we're not trying to go more general in terms of the exam. So just for clarification purposes.
Yeah, I'm not sure, Bob, if what's appropriate. Well, I appreciate the input of our council. Would it be possible to make a motion that we just draft this language anyway and see what happens at OAL?
I would think, yeah, we can do that. Council has given us her impressions, but I think.
Yeah,
we
be
can-
free to disregard advice. You are, I mean, you're the client, you're free to disregard advice.
I think one thing I'd like to bring up, and unfortunately I can't find it in here, but I know with the ARC, who accredits the PA programs, if I'm not mistaken, originally that was written CAHIA or any organization that follows CAHIA. It didn't at that time specifically say the ARC because it didn't exist for a couple more years. But that kind of opened the road for ARC to come in, and since that was already in the regulation, it was allowed to happen.
The issue that I see is if NCCPA went away tomorrow, and let's say AAPA or some other national organization decided that they wanted to administer an examination, we have to go through this whole process instead of just deciding to accept the other certifying body and then have psychometrician look at the test. Right now, we can't do that because it only lists the NCCPA. So I think that this is something that would enhance public protection because you have other options instead of only one route if the test becomes unavailable, or if the psychometricians decided that this test wasn't valid, then we would have no other options. So even though nothing exists right now, my personal feeling is I would like the opportunity to talk to the OAL about it and say this is why I think we should do this and why it's a good thing for public protection. You know, I don't like just saying no because I don't think it'll work. I've been told that my whole life. I don't like that. So.
Can I have a comment? I'm just really pleased that it's not even 9 a.m. and I already get to disagree with Jed.
Set records.
I think that my sense is that this is unnecessary at this time because I can't imagine a scenario under which we would not have time to address this as a new test was being created. We would need to talk. I mean, it would take time for that, for that to be developed, right? We would be aware of that. We would need to talk about it, think about it, examine it. I imagine that process would last at least over several board meetings in some period of time. So I can understand like the desire for flexibility, but I can't imagine a scenario under which we would just make a rash decision to change the exam that we're making. I think we would have time to change the regulation. And I do take council's advice that the regulation is very unlikely to be able to move all the way through the process. And my sense is that we might waste a notable amount of the staff's time. It's a really onerous process for them to have to go through this. I'm just less inclined to have them do that for an activity that's probably not going to result in a change.
So if I understand correctly, basically the way it's worded now, we really can't do anything until there is another body that offers an examination.
That would be my recommendation.
And my concern is, everybody here has discussed, okay, well, when the new body comes into existence, we have plenty of time to get a regulation done. If you look at item number 12 on our agenda today, it's regulations. Half of those regulations have been on our agenda for over 2 years. They have gone nowhere. They're either sitting in DCA. We have one that is about as non-controversial as you could possibly get to create a retirement license. I mean, it's nothing. It's still sitting in DCA. They haven't signed off on it. It hasn't even gotten to the Office of Administrative Law. So we're talking about potentially 3 years after ABC creates a new certifying agency before we could say, okay, we want to offer that to our licensees also. So by making some movement today, even if it doesn't pass, if nothing else, it's going to send a strong message to the NCCPA that this state is not happy with what they've been doing. They are totally unrealistic and totally non-responsive to this board. And they've proven it in lack of communication to us over the years.
I have a question for council. Let's say tomorrow we find out that this organization doesn't exist anymore, but there's another one comes up in 2 days with a examination. What's the process to get the regulation changed? You said there was an emergency?
Yes, there is. And so we would draft text to have in front of you to initiate an emergency rulemaking. It's filed, and OAL has 5 days to review it and approve it or disapprove it, and then if they don't disapprove it, then it's effective 10 days later. So it's a very quick process, and then you have, I think, I want to say 150 days?
180.
180 days to begin the regular rulemaking process and start that, get that taken care of. And you know, my experience with emergency regulations is that they're, you know, we alert everyone in the chain that's responsible, and it's taken care of. With respect to some of the regulations you have, it's because staff didn't put it on the agenda for a while, and that you initiated, and it was.
I disagree with that.
Well, the unlicensed activity reg, I know that was not drafted for years, and that's not the reason why it's been taking a long time. So in any event, when it comes to emergency regulations, my experience has been that they understand that it's a high priority and it's taken care of. And I understand that there has been additional time with the new process to get things reviewed. But it's, and like I said, when you have something as critical as an examination pending, I can't imagine it not being acted on.
So there's a process where it's not going to take a year or 2 or 3 years down
yeah,
the
no,
road,
I mean,
so
to
that's-
finalize the and make it permanent, it takes about a year. But for
so that-
emergency regulations, they go effective 10 days after approval from the Office of Administrative Law, and they're effective immediately after the 10-day period passes.
They don't have to go to DCA at all,
They do go through DCA, but it's an expedited process.
but it would be long. I mean, if it happened, let's say it happened tomorrow, we would have to have language, we would have to have a conference
You'd have
call.
to have an emergency, you'd have to have a special meeting.
Right, so
to
that's.
consider it. That's 48
we're
hours
looking at-
notice. That's
We're
2
looking
days.
at a month because we have to calendar the agenda for the conference call for 10 days.
Right, and there's also the legislative option. You can go to the legislature and ask for urgency bill and get that, you know. There's options for getting things taken care of, and, you know, there's a process available to you.
Do we have definitions of emergency?
Yeah, it's in the Administrative Procedure Act. I don't have it in front of me, but I can get it during the break if you need it.
Okay.
What happens to people in those 10 days that we're trying to get this approved, who want to get certified and there's nobody? What happens to those people?
Well, they'd have to wait 10 days to take the other examination. But, I mean, I've never heard of that happening in
Wouldn't-
all my history with the department, but
Wouldn't the other examination have to be evaluated by psychometricians and be accepted? I mean, it's not a fast process. You know.
right, and that wouldn't change even if you got the reg proposal through. So,
Right, but it's,
and I don't think it would get through, actually, so.
Okay, well, if someone would like to make a motion, do we have more comment?
No, thank you.
Okay.
well, you know, I'll make the motion. If it's not seconded, that's fine, or if the board declines it, but I'd like to make the motion to amend the current language to read "or another board-approved certifying body."
Okay, do I have a second?
I'll second.
Okay. Further discussion by board members? Public comment? Okay, I'll call the vote. Charles Alexander?
I'm going to abstain.
Okay. Jennifer Caldquist?
Aye.
Sonia Early?
Abstain.
Javier Escobar Acosta?
Abstain.
Jed Grant?
Aye.
Catherine Hazelton?
Nay.
Xavier Martinez?
Nay.
Robert Sachs, aye. Mary Valencia?
Nay.
Okay, motion fails for lack of a majority. All right, why don't we take a 10-minute break, and we will come back for a presentation by the American Academy of Physician Assistants.
Where are we?
Go to my
Presentation.
timeout.
Seriously.
Okay, yes.
I'd like to have you make a note that for our next meeting that we put in the discussion under item 8 as a closed-door session.
Okay.
So, and that we get
He
some
wants to discuss
additional
this in
information on
closed
this,
session?
so we can discuss it.
Actually, there's no authority to discuss that in closed session. It's an open
sorry?
session. There's no authority to have that discussion in closed session? Item 8, is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, the item we just discussed.
Right. There's no authority under the Open Meeting Act to hold a closed session discussion on that item. So I would not recommend that.
Well, I just felt that we
So-
didn't have enough information, and we were trying to pass a motion without,
Well, we
enough
could bring it back
information.
and discuss it
Sure,
in open.
another
session.
meeting.
Yeah, we can
With
discuss
more
it.
information.
Okay, then, I thought you said you could have it in the closed-door session.
For examinations, if you get an exam that comes to your attention, you
Okay.
certainly can hold a closed session to discuss the examination.
Okay,
But there isn't an exam yet. When you do, you could.
okay, thank you.
Yes.
Yeah, I agree. I just think that, my vote was based upon not having enough information, and the background on this.
Sure.
This came up as an item of information and not an item for action. And so I think we need more information in order to make.
Okay, so you want item
an educated-
number 8 on the next agenda
On the
for the
next,
next
yes.
meeting, got it.
Yes.
I would agree.
Okay.
Okay.
Works for me.
At this time, I would like to introduce L. Gail Curtis, who is President and Chair of the Board of Directors of the American Academy of Physician Assistants. She's going to give us a presentation on the future of the PA profession, and you all should have handouts. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you so much. It's my pleasure to be here with you this morning, and I really appreciate the opportunity to address you. You should have a handout that looks like this. I will sort of talk and refer you to different pages of this handout as we go along. So what I'd like to do this morning is talk about where the PA profession is now and what we at AAPA envision for the future. I'd like to take a look at how the practice environment for PAs in California compares to that of other states. And I'd like to also take a look at how AAPA's new policies aim to ensure that the PA profession will continue to thrive amongst the various advancements and changes in the way healthcare is being delivered. Our goal at AAPA is to ensure that state laws and regulations allow for optimal PA utilization. If you go ahead and turn to page 3. This is a quick demographic snapshot of California's PAs. California, as you may know, has the highest number of PAs in the nation except for New York. So you have about 11,000 PAs in California. More than 36% of the PAs in California specialize in primary care, and that's above the national average, which is about 28%. Over half of California's PAs practice in an outpatient setting, which again is above the national average of 47%. And about 27% of the PAs in California practice in hospitals. In California, a typical day for a PA, they'll see about 70 patients. If you would turn to page 4. As the PA profession turns 50 this year, we're committed to assuring that our profession keeps pace with the modern advances in the delivery of health care. Decades ago, when states began to pass laws authorizing PA practice, there were many unknowns about this new profession. Because the profession was new, many state laws and regulations included provisions that seemed indicated at that time. PA advocates even likely agreed to these provisions because PA and the PA profession was something of an experiment 50 years ago. Well, it's 50 years later, and our profession has grown from 3 PAs at Duke University to begin with to with only 1 PA program in the nation to now having 224 programs, if you can believe that, and about 115 PAs in the nation. So we know a lot more about our profession. We know that there's a rigorous education process that we receive and that we provide high-quality care for our patients. If you'd go to page 5. PAs are educated in the medical model at master's level accredited programs, and most are very similar to Stanford's curriculum, which I've put here outlined for you to look at. The typical PA program is about 27 continuous months without breaks, so that's 3 academic years, and it's always broken into 2 phases, the preclinical or didactic phase, followed by the clinical phase. In the didactic or the classroom phase, there are courses in anatomy, physiology, pharmacology, physical diagnosis, medicine and surgery, behavioral science, and medical ethics. The clinical phase consists of rotations in medicine and in surgery specialties, including and required family medicine, internal medicine, general surgery, pediatrics, obstetrics and gynecology or women's health, emergency medicine, and psychiatry. And I know all the PAs on the board, this is probably a bit of a review for you, but I just think it's important for us to really understand the depth and breadth of the PA educational process. Graduating students will have completed 2,000 hours of supervised clinical experiences. If you would turn to page 6, or slide 6, I guess it is. So we know that PAs provide safe, high-quality patient care, and over the years, the profession has been well studied. Research provides evidence of the outstanding quality that PAs provide. The value of PAs to the healthcare system is both impressive and conclusive. We at AAPA have a lengthy biography showcasing the research that's been done on the PA profession, and there's a link there that you can go to our webpage and see, but I also brought one hard copy that refers to some of the many, many studies that show that PAs provide excellent and competent patient care. I do want to just highlight 3 of them. In 2014, a study by the California Office of Statewide Health Planning and Development concluded that PAs are vital healthcare team members. And in terms of providing comprehensive care to patients and extending care to rural and underserved areas that lack physicians, PAs make up this very important part of that healthcare system. If you would go to slide 7. Just this last year, a study by the Peterson Center on Healthcare and Stanford University's Clinical Excellence Research Center ranked the best primary care practices in the country. And in this study, they found that practices that ensure PAs are able to work to the full extent of their education and experience are ranked the highest. If you would look at slide 8. In 2015, a cost analysis published in the Nursing Economics found that restrictive state laws lead to underutilization of both PAs and NPs, and that this negatively affects and impacts the cost of care. In this one study, it determined that even modest changes to the NP and PA state laws in Alabama could result in a savings of $729 million over a 10-year period. So with what we know about PAs and PA practice, we encourage states to revise and update laws and rules that are standing in the way of optimal PA utilization. If you would look at slide 9. We understand that the mission of your board is to protect the public, and we have a deep appreciation of the role of regulators. As PAs, we are equally committed to protecting our patients and the public, which goes hand in hand with our commitment to improving the health of our patients. As regulators, I know you are aware of the Federal Trade Commission's interest in professional regulation. In 2016, the FTC recommended that state legislators, regulators, and policy decision makers carefully evaluate whether purported safety justifications are well-founded. They recommend considering whether less restrictive alternatives would protect patients without imposing undue burdens on competition and undue limits on patient care access to healthcare services. The FTC also noted that state laws requiring PAs to practice under the supervision of physicians inherently give supervising physicians control over the PA's ability to access the healthcare marketplace. The FTC further stated that even well-intentioned laws and regulations may include unnecessary or overbroad restrictions that may frustrate the development of innovative and effective models of team-based care. It is important that regulation of the profession does not limit evidence-based professional practices and access to care. If you would turn to page 10. About 10 years ago, AAPA identified 6 key elements of modern PA practice as a partial way to measure how well each state allows full utilization of PAs. These include using licensure as the regulatory term for the profession, authorizing full prescriptive authority for PAs, allowing scope and collaboration details and chart review policies to be determined at the practice level, and allowing physicians to work with the number of PAs that is appropriate for the practice setting. You can see on this page how many states have achieved each element. The next page shows the number of key elements that each state has achieved. On page 11, as you can see, 7 states have enacted all 6.
Slide 11? Are you saying slide 11? Okay.
Yes, I'm sorry. I keep saying page and it's really slide. Thank you for that. So on that slide, 7 states have enacted all 6 elements, and more than 30 states have at least 4, and as you can see, California is one of the states that has 4 of the 6 key elements. The dark blue states have all of the key elements. The bright red states, Iowa and West Virginia, have only 1 key element. They use the term licensure. The darker red color indicates states with the second lowest number of key elements, having only 2. Generally, California laws are good. The next page, or slide, shows more detail on how your provisions compare to other states. Now, this is a busy slide, but as mentioned, California has 4 key elements: licensure, full prescriptive authority, and scope and collaboration or supervision are determined at the practice level. However, California, as I'm sure you're aware, statutes restrict physicians to working with up to 4 PAs at one time. And though I understand, I think there might be a bill moving through the legislature on this topic. California statutes also contain chart co-signature and chart review requirements, which takes away important time from the ability to care for patients. In comparing California to the 23 states and Washington, D.C. listed here, 15 of these states do not have chart co-signature requirements. 14 states impose no restriction on the number of PAs with whom a physician may practice, and states are certainly taking note that this provision needs a closer look, as it unnecessarily limits the number of available providers to see patients. 3 states, Mississippi, Minnesota, and Michigan, recently repealed their restriction on the number of PAs with whom a physician may practice. And if you would now look at slide 13. Even with relatively good laws, things can be improved. Simply having all 6 of these elements isn't enough to meet the country's health care needs. And this is the basis for AAPA's new policy that updates our guidelines for state regulation for PAs to include provisions that support optimal team practice. Under AAPA's new policy, we are seeking changes to laws and regulations that would emphasize PA's commitment to team practice with the degree of collaboration determined at the practice level, that would eliminate legal requirements for a PA to have a specific relationship with a physician in order to practice, that would authorize PAs to be directly reimbursed by all public and private insurers, and that would create autonomous majority PA boards to regulate PA practice or give that authority to healing arts and medical boards with PAs as members. Since this new policy was adopted, which happened in May, we have been asked various questions, and one is whether this new policy will allow an inexperienced PA to practice independently. Well, as PAs, we have ethical and professional responsibilities just like all other health professionals. And these guidelines describe a system that requires PAs to practice within the limits of their education and experience and the standard of care, and to collaborate and consult with and refer to physicians and others as required. This is very similar to the way PAs practice now. The truth is, these provisions don't change the patient care or health services that PAs provide. They actually remove obstacles that have only served to slow teams down. The new policy also seeks fairness for PAs. PAs should be eligible for direct reimbursement, just like physicians and advanced practice nurses. Additionally, the regulation of PA practice is best served by state regulatory boards, where a majority of the board members are also members of the profession. 26 states currently have separate PA boards, or PAs as voting members on the state medical board. We have recently sent the FTC AAPA's new policy, and they responded positively to it. Of course, it's up to every state to decide if they want to implement the new policy, and we realize that some states may be interested in only certain parts or a little bit of the policy at this time. If you would look at slide 14 now. Based on what we know about PA practice and AAPA's new policy, we are creating a dashboard to evaluate state regulation of the profession, as noted here on slide 14. Here's how California stacks up on some of these key provisions. California has an efficient licensure system for PAs. And it's obvious, since I'm sitting here today, that California checks off the next item of having a separate PA board. Ideally, this board would have full jurisdiction over all PA issues, including scope of practice, or a PA should sit on the medical board. California also specifically includes PAs as primary care providers. California Medicaid reimburses for services provided by PAs, enrolls PAs as rendering providers, and identifies PAs on claims. As discussed, California has four of the current six elements. On the next dashboard item, California does not meet AAPA's recommended policy that PAs should be responsible for the care they provide. California regulations state that supervising physicians are responsible for all medical services provided by a PA. Ideally, PAs would be solely responsible for their practice unless a physician has been directly involved in the patient's care. AAPA strongly recommends repealing language like this from state regulations. Also, California state law does not authorize direct reimbursement for PAs, so they remain hidden providers. And with optimal team practice environments, the things that should not be included would be requirements for current certification or licensure or license renewal, or requirements for a specific relationship with a physician in order to practice. These serve as unnecessary obstacles. If you would look at slide 15. We are seeing some trends emerge as states recognize that many of the old requirements for PAs and PA practice are not necessary. A good example is Michigan, which enacted groundbreaking new laws late last year that make it clear that PAs practice in teams with physicians without supervision or delegation. The law also allows physicians to work with an unlimited number of PAs and repealed physician responsibility language so that PAs now assume full responsibility for the care that they provide. If you would look at slide 16. Although modernizing PA practice laws and regulations is one of AAPA's main priorities, there are a few other issues that we're working on as well. We are actively working with the Federation of State Medical Boards to enhance license portability for PAs by exploring development of an interstate medical licensure compact and launching a uniform licensure application for PAs. We've also worked on what we call harmonization acts, which is legislation that adds PAs to areas of law where physicians and other providers are currently included, and PAs should also be specifically named. Another AAPA priority is working with our partner organizations to assure accountability for promises that they've made to our profession. We remain in communication with NCCPA on two important issues: finding alternatives to high-stakes recertification testing and repealing state laws and regulations that tie PA current certification to license renewal. In July, we announced that AAPA will contract with a highly respected, unbiased, independent organization, research organization, to identify evidence-based alternatives to high-stakes PA recertification testing. This year, AAPA also researched establishing an alternate certifying body for PAs. After a significant amount of research and evaluation and listening to our PA colleagues, our members, and our delegates at our House of Delegates this year, the board decided not to pursue establishing an alternate certifying organization at this time. During this year, discussion and in light of NCCPA's activities during this time, several states began looking at changes to their own laws, just as you just discussed here, concerning certification to allow for another certifying entity should one be established. Some states have already have laws that allow that if another certifying body should be created, and it would be at the discretion of their board which to recognize. Other states have realized that maybe they should proactively revise the language for that and to repeal state laws and regulations that tie current PA certification to license renewal. And this is certainly a goal of the AAPA. If you would look at slide 17. So in summary, the takeaway points are PAs complete very rigorous education and training. And the PAs on this board can attest to this, as can I. And I've practiced for 35 years and now serve as chair of a PA program in North Carolina. The PAs that are graduated from our programs are highly competent and ready to practice. They are exceptionally qualified to deliver safe and high-quality patient care. But like I said, you don't have to take my word for it. There are a whole bunch of research that bears out this fact, and it's available on the AAPA website. And finally, patients and the healthcare system as a whole benefit when the clinicians can provide the care that they are competent and qualified to provide without unnecessary state law barriers. In order to achieve optimal utilization of PAs, there must be optimal PA laws and regulations in place. And I thank you very much for the time to address you this morning, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
I have a question.
Yes.
Can you go into a little bit more detail why you decided not to pursue a different licensing program? I mean,
Sure.
that was the crux of our conversation here.
Yeah, sure. It was a year-long process of really studying what it took to stand up a new agency, how long it would take for a new agency to be up and running. Were there opportunities to work with the already established agency? Could we, it's a complicated process because of antitrust regulations. AAPA cannot say to NCCPA, we want you to do this, or we would like you to do this, as they can't say that to us. But I think over this year, while we were doing this studying, I think that some progress was made. We're in communication with NCCPA. If you looked at what they put forward to begin with of all the changes that they were going to make, they backed down from all of them. And PANRE was really not even on the table when those regulations that caused AAPA to look at this possibility, it was not even one of the things that was being talked about. However, I like to say NCCPA kind of opened Pandora's box, and so now everything's on the table. I think that they have heard what PAs have said across the nation. There's been an awful lot of information brought back to NCCPA about what PAs felt about what was going on. And so at the end of the day, when AAPA considered everything, we did not feel it was the best course for our organization to move forward with that at this time.
Thank you.
I have a question. You mentioned the states that changed their co-signature requirements or removed that requirement. Do you have any data on those states? Was there any adverse effect on patient safety or any positive effect on patient access to care?
Well, as you likely know, there isn't any evidence-based data that shows that co-signature improves patient safety or patient care. So no, I'm not aware of any adverse effects of that. And there are studies on the AAPA website that you can refer to that will give you the actual metrics and data.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I have a question. Thank you so much for coming, and I love your PowerPoint. Is there any way I can get this? I'd love to see all the colors and then be able to enlarge.
Absolutely.
Okay. And my next question is, when you mentioned study findings, did you guys put it in a paper? Did you guys write it down, or is this all discussed and just that's what the takeaway was?
Study findings for?
Study findings for what your board or your board of delegates found out regarding the optimal, the alternative body for physician assistants to
So
testing.
in concerning our decision about not standing up a new body?
Correct.
We have a lot of things that we considered. I'm not sure that we have any studies, but if you would like more information about some of the things that we thought about, I'm sure we could provide that to you.
So that'll be great. What you mentioned before was your study findings. So I'm wondering, was it a meeting, and then what was the takeaway, or do you have actual data that says this point was achieved, this point was not achieved, this was not viable, et cetera, because that information would have been great for our last point to make some further decisions. But
we did a study of our members. We actually sent out a study of our members, so we have that. But mostly we met with NCCA, which is the certifying body for certifying bodies, and we had a lot of discussions with them about what it takes to stand up a new body. We polled our members. There was discussion in the House of Delegates. We had a lot of opportunity on our website for people to provide comment, which was there for the whole year. So as far as an actual hard study where we collected data other than what we did with our membership study, it was mostly discussions.
okay, and is NCCA a part of NCCPA?
NCCA is the National Certifying Body for Certification Body. So NCCPA is certified by NCCA. And if we had set up a new body, we would have also been certified by NCCA.
Since this is a new agenda item for next time, can we just ask that staff collect all this kind of information and have it for us?
Certainly.
Maybe we
Yes.
can.
Yeah, we can do
The
that.
information she's pointing to, because it's germane to the topic. Thank you.
Yeah, I just have one question too. Thank you again for this informative presentation.
Thank
As
you
a
for the opportunity.
non-PA and a public member, I'm very curious in terms of what the diversity makeup of PAs are. And you gave some great numbers here, but it would be nice to get that information, the breakdown. And what efforts are the AAPA doing to encourage states and schools and organizations to increase the diversity of PAs within our nation?
That is just such a great point, and as we all know, we don't have enough diversity in medicine in general. It's a problem in MD programs as well as PA programs. And AAPA has a very active diversity caucus and works on issues such as that. It's also one of our strategic elements in our strategic plan for AAPA to increase diversity. It's certainly an issue that I think most states and all PA programs grapple with on a regular basis.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Gail, thank you very much. I have to cut the questions short because we have a time-specific petition hearing which needs to start at 10 o'clock. So thank you very much for your presentation. We very much appreciate it.
Thank you very much for the opportunity.
We will take a 10-minute recess to set up for the hearing, and we will reopen at 10 o'clock on the dot. Okay, if everybody could please take their seats. I'd like to call the Physician Assistant Board back to order. At this time, we will move to a petition hearing, petition for early termination of probation. PA is James Paul Ressler. Judge Brell is our administrative law judge sitting to my right, and I will turn the meeting over to her at this time. Thank you.
Okay, good morning. Court reporter, we're going to start the record now. The record is now open in the matter of the petition for penalty relief by James Paul Ressler, PAC, before the Physician Assistant Board, Department of Consumer Affairs, State of California. The quorum of the board is present. This hearing is being held on August 11 of 2017 in San Diego, California. I am Administrative Law Judge Teresa Brell. I work for the Office of Administrative Hearings, and I will be presiding over the hearing today. After the petition hearing is completed, then the board will decide in closed session how to deal with it. Now, why don't we have appearances first for the Attorney General's office?
Good morning, Your Honor. Deputy Attorney General Martin Hagan, appearing for respondent Xavier Becerra, Attorney General of the State of California.
All right, and for the petitioner, sir, why don't you say your name?
My name is James, last name Ressler, R-E-S-S-L-E-R.
Okay, let me tell you how we're going to proceed, Mr. Ressler. I'm assuming this is a new thing for you.
Correct.
What's going to happen today is first I'm going to allow the Deputy Attorney General, Mr. Hagan, to present evidence, and then he may have some statements he may want to make. Then I'll swear you in, and I will I'll allow you to make your presentation to the board. After you're done making your presentation, then Mr. Hagan will be given an opportunity to ask you questions. You're going to be under oath.
Okay.
When he gets done asking his questions, then the board members are allowed to ask questions if they have any. And then if either party, Mr. Hagan or you, want to make some closing remarks after all of the evidence has been presented, all your testimony and all the documents, you may call witnesses as well, Mr. Ressler, if you have any. After that's all done, then the case will be submitted, and the board will discuss it in closed session, and then you will receive a written decision in the mail. Okay, so do you have any questions?
No, Your Honor.
All right. Mr. Hagan, you ready to proceed?
Yes, Your Honor. Our case is going to be premised primarily on the documents that we have submitted as part of Respondent's Exhibit Binder that's been distributed to Mr. Ressler and to each of the board members, as I understand. We're not going to be calling any witnesses. I would like to go ahead and give a brief summary to the board, and included within your exhibit binder is a request for a protective order as to exhibit number 11. From my understanding with Mr. Ressler, there's no objection to the protective order, and it's just that this evaluation contains some information that's of a private nature, and I'd like to go ahead and move for a protective order on Exhibit 11.
Okay, and I have the protective order here. Mr. Ressler, What a protective order means, he's asking that Exhibit 11, which are some medical documents, be placed under seal. That means those medical records will not be made part of the public record. The board members can consider those and look at them. I can look at them. Mr. Hagan has looked at them, and you've seen them. But it will not be part of the public record. But in order to do that, we need to have a protective order placing them under seal. Is that all right with you, sir?
That's fine with me, Your Honor.
Okay, so the request for a protective order is granted. I have a written, I've prepared and signed a protective order sealing Exhibit 11, and I've brought multiple copies, and I will give them to Mr. Ressler and Mr. Hagan when we go off the record. Okay? Mr. Hagan, I did notice something else when I was thumbing through the exhibits, and I had some discussions with President Sachs about this. There are some documents that are in the binder of exhibits that have some personal identifying information, such as social security numbers, driver's license numbers, some things like that, dates of birth. And so if it's all right with the parties, I would be happy to redact that information from the official set of exhibits that I'm marking today after submission. Is that all right with you, Mr. Hagan?
Yeah, that'd be appreciated. Thank you, Your Honor.
What about you, Mr. Ressler?
That would be fine.
Am I saying your name right?
It's Ressler.
Ressler.
Like in wrestling.
Okay, sorry about that.
That's okay. That would be fine. Thank you.
Another thing that I've talked to some of the staff for the board is that I understand the board has unredacted versions of the exhibits that they've been allowed to review. And what I've been asked to ask you to do is, after we end closed session, to go ahead and give them to the executive director, and she will send them for destruction so that there's not any inadvertent disclosure of the confidential identifying information. And then the official record of the exhibits that were considered by the board will be the official set that I will redact before they are returned to the board. Is that all right, Mr. Sachs?
Yes.
Okay, so that's what we will do. Any problem with that, Mr. Hagan or Mr. Ressler?
No, Your Honor.
No, Your Honor.
All right, go ahead, Mr. Hagan.
What I wanted to do, Your Honor, is just give the board a little brief rundown on the case. The facts in this case are largely undisputed pursuant to some of the language in the accusation where Mr. Ressler agreed to all the charges and allegations contained in the accusation. As far as Mr. Ressler, he was issued his PA license on March 18th, 1985, and it expires on May 31st, 2019, unless renewed. As ALJ, as a judge indicated, we're here today on a petition for termination. It was filed in 2016. That's Exhibit 4 to Respondent's Binder. And I've also included a memorandum concerning the board's investigation that was done on the petition for penalty relief. And that's dated July 22nd, 2016. It's marked as Respondent's Exhibit number 5. As far as the discipline at issue in this case, the accusation was filed on October 16th, 2012. That's included as part of Exhibit 5. And the disciplinary charges related to 2 convictions for driving under the influence of alcohol that occurred in 2009 and 2010. I'll provide some brief facts on those. The parties entered into a stipulated settlement that was effective November 27, 2013, and the penalty determination was revocation stayed 7 years probation under various terms and conditions, which included drugs abstained from use, that Mr. Ressler was to abstain from any use of alcohol, he was to submit to biologic fluid testing, and he was to be evaluated for a diversion program. Ultimately, it was determined that he did not need to go to a diversion program, and the report on that is Exhibit 11 that is covered under the protective order and is available for the board's review. There were also the standard terms and conditions, which included a cost recovery of $3,145, which it's my understanding that Mr. Ressler has paid in full. The probation is currently tolling as of approximately January or February 2016, based on Mr. Ressler's retirement as a PA. It's my understanding that he's not been practicing since that time. So when you consider the effectively tolled time, he's been on probation for approximately 2 years and 1 month. The first DUI arrest occurred in Michigan on February 15, 2009. According to the available documents, which have been marked for identification as exhibits, Mr. Ressler was driving 50 miles per hour in a 25 mile per hour zone at 11:45 p.m. According to the officer, he had the objective signs of intoxication, and when asked if he'd been drinking, he indicated that he had had 2 scotches at a friend's house. He made some inconsistent statements as to his times of drinking. He failed the field sobriety test, and his blood alcohol content was measured at 0.169%, more than twice the legal limit in Michigan. Mr. Ressler was charged with driving while intoxicated and entered a plea bargain in which his sentence was reduced to, or the crime was reduced to driving while visually impaired on June 17, 2009, and that was a misdemeanor. Approximately 22 months later, Mr. Ressler was arrested again in Sacramento on December 30th, 2010, and the time of the incident was 5:17 p.m. The exhibits are contained in the exhibit binder as to this second DUI arrest. The DUI investigation came about after 2 Starbucks employees reported that respondent appeared to be under the influence and drove away with 3 kids in the car. The employee witnessed that respondent had trouble standing, and at times he smelled of alcohol. The employee reported that she was concerned for the children, the general public, and thus reported the matter to the police. Shortly thereafter, at 5:37 p.m., a deputy sheriff arrived and inquired of Mr. Ressler regarding the circumstances of the DUI. When asked, respondent denied drinking, but the sheriff smelled alcohol in respondent's breath and requested that the CHP respond to do a DUI investigation. The CHP arrived shortly thereafter, and respondent at that point in time reported that he had had 1 glass of wine between 3:30 and 4 p.m. That's tab 9 on page 521. The CHP officer noticed that Mr. Ressler exhibited objective signs of intoxication and had him submit to a preliminary alcohol screening device, which is the handheld device that the CHP has motorists blow into. His blood alcohol content at that time was recorded at 0.106% at 6:28 p.m. and 0.098% at 6:31 p.m. Respondent was charged with DUI in violation of Vehicle Code Section 23152, Subdivisions A and Subdivision B, with enhancements for having minors in the car and for having a prior DUI conviction in Michigan. Respondent pled no contest on April 16, 2012, and was convicted to a charge of violating Vehicle Code Section 23152, Subdivision B, driving with blood alcohol content in excess of 0.08%. Respondent was sentenced to 45 days in jail. He was required to complete a multiple offender drinking driving program. He was to pay various fines and assessments, and he was placed on probation for 4 years. In approximately July 2014, he moved to have this conviction expunged under Penal Code Section 1203.3, and the motion was granted pursuant to Penal Code Section 1203.4, and his probation was terminated in the interest of justice. And that's Exhibit 4 at page AGO-404. So those are generally the set of facts that are set forth in the exhibits to be moved into evidence by the board. And at this point in time, I'd like to go ahead and identify the exhibits, move them into evidence, and reserve my right to cross-examine Mr. Ressler.
Okay, go ahead.
Marked for identification as Exhibit 1 is a notice of hearing and amended notice of hearing. Do you want me to go through, Judge, and just read each one and then move them in, or?
Yeah, we can do it that way. Yeah, I've marked Exhibit 1 for identification.
Okay. The next exhibit is Exhibit number 2, a certification of records that was prepared by the Physician Assistant Board, authenticating the documents that are included within Respondent's Exhibit Binder.
Okay, so I marked Exhibit 2, the certification of records for identification.
Exhibit number 3 is a license certification for Mr. Ressler that's dated July 11th, 2017.
Okay, the license certification is marked as Exhibit 3.
The next exhibit is Mr. Ressler's petition for termination of probation that's base stamped AGO 393-486, and that's marked for identification as Exhibit 4.
Okay, the petition for termination of probation is marked as Exhibit 4.
The next exhibit is Exhibit number 5. It's the investigation report or a petition for termination of probation without the attachments, and that's marked as AGO 386-391.
All right, the investigation report is marked for identification as Exhibit 5.
The next exhibit, Exhibit number 6, is the decision by the board with the stipulated settlement and the accusation attached, and that's base stamped as AGO 488-504.
All right, I've marked for identification as Exhibit 6, the document Mr. Hagan just described, the decision.
Number 7, what's been marked for identification, Exhibit 7, is the arrest report and related documents for the first DUI arrest on February 15, 2009, and those are marked AGO 505-510.
Okay, so those exhibits, the arrest report and related documents for the February 15, 2009 arrest have been marked for identification as Exhibit 7.
The next exhibit in order, Exhibit number 8, is the conviction documents for the first DUI arrest on February 15, 2009 that have been marked with the AGO base stamp of 511-516.
Okay, so I marked as Exhibit 8 the conviction documents for the February 15, 2009 arrest.
The next exhibit in order, Exhibit number 9, the arrest report and related documents for the second DUI arrest on December 30th, 2010, which have been base stamped AGO 517-538.
All right, I've marked as Exhibit 9 for identification the arrest report and related documents for the second DUI arrest on December 30, 2010.
The next exhibit in order, Exhibit number 10, are the conviction documents for the second DUI arrest of December 30, 2010 that have been base stamped as AGO 540-550.
All right, I've now marked as Exhibit 10 the conviction documents for the second DUI arrest.
The next exhibit in order, Exhibit number 11, is the evaluation that's covered under the protective order that's been granted, and that's been base stamped AGO 552-591.
All right, I've now marked as Exhibit 11 the evaluation documents from the Betty Ford Center.
Next in order are the probation reports from October 1, 2013 to June 30, 2017 that have been marked as Exhibit 12.
All right, I've now marked as Exhibit 12 the probationary reports during the dates Mr. Hagan just described.
And the next exhibit in order, in Exhibit number 13, are the Physician Assistant Board's disciplinary guidelines.
All right, I've marked as Exhibit 13 the Physician Assistant Board's disciplinary guidelines.
And with that, Your Honor, I move for the admission of exhibits, number 1 through 13.
Any objection, Mr. Ressler?
I have no objection.
Okay, so exhibits 1 through 12 are received. Exhibit 13, official notice is taken of it. And the protective order, just to remind everyone, will apply to Exhibit 11, which will be received under seal. Anything else you'd like to add at this point, Mr. Hagan?
No, Your Honor.
All right, Mr. Ressler, would you please raise your right hand? Do you swear or affirm that the testimony you are about to give will be the truth under penalty of perjury under the laws of the state of California?
I do.
All right, go ahead, sir, and tell the board what you'd like the board to know.
Okay. Well, first of all, I want to thank Mr. Hagan for getting this all together, as I do not have legal representation. He was kind enough to put this forward together. You're correct in that I don't understand all the legalities in terms of the evidence that has been presented. However, I'm not going to dispute those facts as they are. I would like to at least address Your Honor, Mr. Hagan, and the board members with a statement and answer any questions that anyone would have of me. I would be remiss if I were not remorseful for any violation of any law, civil, misdemeanor, professional, or otherwise. The Superior Court in the state of California, who represent the people of the state of California, the same privilege as people which I've had the privilege of serving over the past 30+ years, summarily agreed after my commitment and fulfillment of their mandate. They acknowledged this and granted the removal of the DUI centered around December 30th, 2010, and summarily expunged that officially from my records. They have granted me a non-guilty plea. I have, in good faith, been consistent with carrying out the requirements of the mandate that was prescribed to me on the administrative hearing that was held in Sacramento in August of 2013. I have undergone daily check-ins for reporting to First Lab or First Source, which is, they determine whether you're selected or not selected for toxicology screening. I went through at least a 90-day diversion program. I was deemed not an appropriate candidate. I would be the first to admit also that I did miss a check-in date of August 5th, 2015. And I contacted Ms. Lynn Forsythe, Mr. Robert Scher, who was involved as a probation monitor. And I notified them as the reasons why I had missed that, both by voicemail, telephonically, email, and subsequent letter. In a nutshell, I was returning back from my memorial with my son, who is 13 years of age. I flew from Detroit to Minneapolis to Sacramento. When I returned home, I simply forgot. I received a letter from this board stating not to miss the check-in. I have never missed a check-in since that date. My toxicology screens, which I have had more than 74 to date, have all remained negative. I have not had any evidence of any alcohol or any drug abuse listed, nor have I had any history of alcohol or drug abuse as related to the reports that were submitted as exhibits, I believe number 11 to Betty Ford. I contacted the board and have been in contact with them from the inception of the DUIs. I have been in contact with Miss Diana Tincher, I believe her name was, and then subsequently with Miss Lynn Forsythe. I was directed by the board to speak with an entity called Maximus. I contacted Maximus, I believe, right after the DUI that was obtained in 2010. And over a period of time, when the court finally went to make a decision, which took them almost 2 years, I recontacted the board to let them know what the findings were. I asked the Maximus people 3 times if I would be eligible to receive an evaluation. They told me I would not be able to receive an evaluation by them, that I would have to voluntarily submit and or be mandated to some diversion program. I had no understanding of what a diversion program was. Nonetheless, I tried to be proactive in that, and through this very board, I was given information on the evaluator that has been present in Sacramento, who they refer to by the name of Dr. Stephen Grinstead. I presented to him sometime, I believe in 2013, I believe that was the time prior to January or February, I think, of 2013, prior to any administrative hearing. At the administrative hearing, I agreed to, with the board's recommendation, of entering a diversion program, keeping track of all the records necessary that was dictated by that program and by the board. I was then placed in the diversion program, I believe, in December of 2013. Within a week, I was sent to participate in group sessions. That would be two group sessions, a group session twice a week, 3 hours at a time. I went to the gentleman that they recommended on Howe Avenue in Sacramento. I sat with him for close to an hour. At the end of that hour's time, he asked me who had referred me. I told him I was referred by the board via Maximus. He informed me at that point that he hadn't been doing those evaluations for over a year and a half. At that point...
If I might, I just want to object on hearsay grounds to some of these statements by other people.
Okay, I'm going to overrule. I think he could let us know what his impression was, so it's overruled.
So I notified Maximus that very evening. Unfortunately, they were closed because it was after 7 p.m., but I left a voicemail for, I believe it was Terry Sargent, who was the case nurse manager, and I told her what the circumstances were. She contacted me the next day, and within 48 hours, she had given me the name of Francine Farrell, who is the group manager for the sessions. And then I presented promptly at Francine's scheduled appointment time, completed that requirement as Maximus had requested. I then was sent sometime in mid-January to an evaluator, and I requested from Maximus that I see a male evaluator in case there was any invasive thing, an exam or something of this nature. I was told that I would go wherever they sent me to. I said that would be fine. I presented then to Dr. Stephen Grinstead. Dr. Stephen Grinstead evaluated me again, and I believe those reports are contained also as part of the exhibit that was presented today by Mr. Hagan. I received a letter, I believe, from the board stating that this was conflict of interest because I had seen Dr. Stephen Grinstead before, yet I was taking the advice of someone on the board that this was the man that would be the man to go to. Nonetheless, I received a letter that stated something to the effect that there was a conflict of interest. I was then repatriated to Betty Ford. I left my home in Sacramento and flew down to Palm Springs. I attended an outpatient basis that lasted 3 days. I was seen by an addiction physician, a clinical psychiatrist, a clinical psychologist, and a licensed clinical social worker, the latter of which did the historical interviews regarding my mother, my sisters, I believe Tanya Johnson at work, and made a comprehensive report that went to the board. I underwent toxicology screens while I was there. I underwent hair sampling looking for a substance called PETH, which indicates some type of long-term or chronic abuse. All those tests were negative. I completed that evaluation and left Betty Ford. This was in mid-January, I believe, and the report was elicited. They made the recommendations that I should stop smoking, that I should reduced my cholesterol, that I was not an appropriate candidate for a diversion program or continued monitoring. I then went home. I got another letter from the board, I believe, around the end of February, which stated that I was safe, or I'm not safe, but I was allowed to return to work as a PA. They have always determined from these evaluations by either Dr. Stephen Grinstead or by the experts at Betty Ford that I have been deemed safe to work with a patient. I've never had an alcohol or drug issue that has been preceding or after these isolated events on the DUI. Once they released me from the diversion program, they said you must continue your toxicology monitoring, you must continue your quarterly reports. I have continued my toxicology screening. I go in when they request that I go in. I submit samples. I also provide the reports to Mr. Scheer, Robert Scheer. I am under one understanding that he did not receive a report, I believe, in 2015 for their quarterly report involving October through December of 2014. But my practice has always been that I would take both a supervisory report and a quarterly report, put them in a letter, seal it, stamp it, and send it to Mr. Scheer. But if there was a mistake made, then a mistake was made. Otherwise, I think I've been consistent with providing them the information. I have forwarded to him several times certified copies or certified information regarding the quarterly reports and supervisory reports when I was out of town. If I was in Nevada, if I was in Arizona, if I was in Michigan, I would do that out of an abundance of caution so that I'd make sure that he did receive all that information. I retired in January of 2016, and the reason for my retirement was in October of 2014, I sustained a stroke, which has left me with some difficulty finding specific words. I'm able to otherwise walk normally and get around and drive. But, I use that as basically my launch point so that I would be able to spend more time with my family. I have not worked since my retirement date of 1/6/2016. I've spent time mostly at home, doing home things that my wife has accumulated over a long period of time. And believe me, there's a very long list. I would like at some point to go back and do some clinical work, perhaps in the operating room, because that's where most of my skills are badly needed. My accomplishments have been small. I have graduated Duke, with honors in 1983, cum laude, 7th in my class of 38 people. I also have a degree as a medical technologist and a microbiologist prior to becoming a PA. I did ground research with the use of interferon in the 1970s, and also with the use of carbon fiber, which is commonly used now in ski equipment, using that on patients. My first position as a PA was in 1983 with novice, semi-professionals, professional athletes, including the San Francisco 49ers, as well as the Cirque du Soleil personnel. I was the first PA hired by the Department of Orthopedic Surgery at UC San Francisco Medical Center. I remain in good standing at all hospital affiliations. I've never had any disciplinary actions from any of the hospitals, including Sequoia Hospital, Redwood City, Mount Zion Hospital, University of California, San Francisco Medical Center, Marshall Hale Hospital, all in San Francisco, UC Davis Medical Center, Sutter Roseville, Mercy San Juan, Kaiser Permanente locations in Roseville and Morse Avenues in the Sacramento area. I was the first PA to develop an externship program for PAs at UCSF in orthopedic surgery, where I hosted students from around the United States, from California, as well as students from Hahnemann, University of Iowa, Duke University, and Baylor Medical Center. I ran into a student I had hosted back in 1995 in the hallway, who is now 18 years in practice in cardiovascular surgery. I was the second PA hired at UC Davis Medical Center, Department of Orthopedic Surgery, and I've ranked in the top 3 senior physician assistant positions within the entire UC medical system. My performance evaluations have been superior, exceeding expectations, and this occurred through my entire 34-year history. I've had 100% support from my mentors, from my supervising physician, as well as the hospital administration and hospital staff, with my latest employer, which was UC Davis Medical Center. I have saved only 3 lives as a PA in 30 years. A 4-year-old who swallowed marble, a 57-year-old woman who self-medicated with Narcan, stopped breathing, I reversed her, and a 10-year-old who had a septic right foot, which I carried from the jungles of Nicaragua. In my remaining time, I would like to continue practice unimpeded, without restriction placed on me by this board. I have assisted in somewhere between 12 to 15,000 total hip and total knee arthroplasties in the course of 30 plus years. During this probationary period, I have been employed at UC Medical Center, as I said, with 100% backing from the administrative as well as the orthopedic staff. There are letters contained within all these exhibits from Dr. Giordani, Dr. John Meehan, Ms. Tanya Johnson, and Ted Coates, who is a colleague of mine who came out of Stanford in 1981. As I said, I've retired. As a retirement, of course, my income is diminished because I'm not getting my regular salary. I would like to continue to work. There are restrictions on that, secondary to Social Security, but I would still like to work. I also wish to travel unimpeded with my family, not having to worry to stop, take time off for vacation, or go someplace where there's not a testing site. And teaching in the future, I think, would be there for me. I have some knowledge, I think, a little bit overall, to impart upon those coming up in the field. I wish to contribute more to my child's education. And though I managed to save $100,000 for each child, I wish to do more. It's my sincere privilege and honor over the past 30 years of my career to participate in care of thousands of patients here in California, as well as from around the world. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Hagan, any questions?
Yes, Your Honor, I have some brief cross-examination of Mr. Ressler. Well, Mr. Ressler, your first DUI occurred in approximately February 2009, correct?
That's correct.
Now, when you were asked if you'd been drinking, you advised the officer you'd been drinking or had had 2 scotches?
I don't recall the exact number, but I believe I told him I had been drinking, yes.
All right. And your BAC was 0.169%.
That's correct.
Okay. The legal limit in Michigan, as you understand it, is 0.08%.
Correct.
Now, it appears, based on your blood alcohol content level, it would appear that you had more than 2 scotches. Is that correct?
If that's what the calculation shows, that would be correct.
Well, I'm asking you, sir, personally, if you had more than 2 scotches on the evening.
I would say that, given that information, yes, I would have had more than 2 scotches.
Okay, so how much did you actually drink on the evening of February 15th?
I'm estimating maybe 4 or 5.
Okay. If you could, just try to let me finish the question.
Oh, I'm
and then
sorry.
provide the answer that will assist the court reporter. So
Absolutely.
I think you indicated that you believe you had 4 to 5 scotches that night?
Best as I can recall.
Now, after your arrest, at least according to some of the documents in the record here, specifically Exhibit 11 at PIH AGO 580, you indicated that you were scared. Is that correct?
I don't recall that I was scared.
Well, let me ask you, you indicated, at least according to the Betty Ford report, that when asked about your first arrest, you knew you had exercised poor judgment. Is that accurate?
According to the report from
Yes.
Betty Ford, yes.
Do you feel that you exercised
Yeah,
poor
yes.
judgment?
I would say yes.
Okay. And at the time of your arrest, I'm assuming you were placed in custody, is that correct?
This is in regards to Michigan?
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Okay. And while you were in custody, did you personally vow to yourself that you would not make the same mistake again?
That is correct. I appeared before the judge in the court at Royal Oak, Michigan, and since this was highly out of character for me, I made that promise.
Okay.
That's correct.
And in fact, you ended up being arrested approximately 22 months later for a second DUI offense. Is that correct?
Almost 2 years to the day from the passing of my father.
Now, as you understand it, 2 Starbucks employees reported that you appeared to be intoxicated, correct?
That's what the report states.
And that they were concerned that you were driving with young children in your car, is that right?
That's correct.
Okay. And how many kids were in the car?
There was my son and my daughter.
Now, according to the criminal complaint and some other documents, there's an indication that there were 3 people in the car, or 3 children.
Correct.
Okay. So you indicated that you had your son in the car. Do you recall what his age was at the time?
This is 2010. So he would have been almost 9 and a half.
Okay.
Or a little over 9.
And I believe you had your daughter in the car, who I understand is maybe 4 years younger than your son?
That's correct.
Okay. And who was the 3rd child in the car?
I think the 3rd child was Sammy.
And
his age is approximately the same age as my son.
And who is Sammy? Is that a relative or a friend's child?
No, he's a friend's child.
Now, as I indicated in my opening statement, as part of your DUI investigation, after this report had been made by the Starbucks employees, you were first contacted by a Sacramento deputy sheriff.
Correct.
And at least according to the report, he recorded that you told him, "I have not had anything to drink today and don't know why anyone would say that."
I don't recall stating that.
Do you recall being asked how much you had to drink?
I think he asked me how much I had drank, and I asked him at home, and I think he said, and I believe I said 1 and 1/2 glasses of wine.
So you believe that his report is inaccurate, is that what you're saying?
No, ask me the question again, please.
I was just asking you about what you had told the Sacramento deputy sheriff. According to his report, he recorded that you told him, "I have not had anything to drink today and don't know why anyone would say that," and that's...
I don't recall that statement that I made. I recall that I told him what I drank.
Okay. And I would just direct the board's attention to exhibit number 9 at page 530, where that's recorded in the police report. Now, next, you were contacted by a CHP officer. Do you recall that?
Yes, I do.
Okay, and he did a driving under the influence investigation.
Correct.
Okay. And do you recall being asked how much you had to drink by the CHP officer?
I don't recall the amount, no.
Did you look at the exhibits that were provided to you as far as any statements you may have provided to the CHP?
Well, I tried to review as many as the packet that you have here and the packet that I received. I've tried to cover all that information.
Now, the report indicates that you told the CHP officer you had a glass of wine. Do you believe that is inaccurate in the report?
I don't know. I don't recall that I told him I had a glass of wine. I don't recall what exact amount that I told him that I had.
So you just don't recall one way or the other, correct?
I don't recall the exact number of what I told him.
All right. I would direct the board's attention as to the statement made to the CHP officer as indicated in Exhibit 9 at page AGO-524. Now, you were evaluated as part of the Betty Ford evaluation, correct?
Correct.
Okay. I'm assuming during that evaluation you were asked several times about how much you had to drink.
I believe I was asked how much I had to drink.
Okay. And so, according to the documents that have been marked as exhibits, you indicated that you had had 1 glass of wine before Starbucks and 1 to 1.5 glasses of wine after Starbucks. Do you recall making that statement?
I would say, as best as I can remember.
Okay. Do you recall making that statement?
I don't recall specifically that statement.
All right. I direct the board's attention to exhibit number 11 at page AGO 580 that indicates the statements that were made to the evaluator at the clinic. So if you look at that last statement, it would indicate you had 2 to 2.5 glasses of wine. I guess my question is to you, is how much did you actually have to drink on that day you were arrested for your second DUI?
Well, if you add those up.
Well, what I'm asking you here today, as you are under oath, how much do you recall drinking that?
If
that
I
day?
said 1 and 1.5, it would have to be 2.5 glasses.
Are you currently participating in any support groups such as Alcoholics Anonymous?
No, I went through that with Maximus program. I attended every day. I did that for almost 3 months.
I have no further questions, Your Honor.
Okay. Now, Mr. Sachs, did you have any questions?
Yes. Mr. Russler, when you signed your original agreement on stipulation,
yes,
you were aware that it was for 7 years?
I was aware it was for 7 years, Mr. Sachs, because my offer, that I understood it at the time of the administration hearing, was I would either surrender my license or agree to the stipulations. And being that I'm currently 64, that would have made me 62, I believe, or somewhere in that neighborhood. With 2 small children, I still needed to work. I cannot not work. Okay. So, yeah, I understand it was a 7-year thing. I would commit to the diversion program. I would commit to quarterly reports. I would commit to group sessions. I would commit to those factors that I understood.
Okay, and are you currently still participating in biologic fluid testing?
I am.
Okay. And I read the documents that show your continuing medical education, but I don't seem to find anything after 2015.
Right. So I believe when we applied for the termination of probation that I've supplied all the information regarding the CME requirements, because I believe in California you have to have so many CME requirements. for that. And so I would take either classes, or I would take conferences, or I would do online studies. I haven't recorded anything yet for this current next period, I believe, which I believe is due to recycle in 2019. But I'm actively pursuing those CMEs, both at conferences as well as online types of studies.
Okay, I have no further questions, Your Honor.
Okay, now, the rest of the board members, if you could raise your hand if you have questions, and I'll say your name so the court reporter can put it down. So, Ms. Early?
Yes. Hello. Thank you for coming. I just have a few questions. So, the petition penalty starts in 2013, and I think that you mentioned that you have 2 years and 1 month of service?
Well, because I retired, and I think it kicks in 30 days after you retire, it's then considered tolling. However, I've been living in California since 1983. I have a home in California. I work in California. My children go to school in California. I don't have any property in any other state or any place on the planet. You know, I haven't worked in any other state. But if you take that tolling time, yes, but there's also something that I understood was that if you don't work 2 years after your tolling, you surrender your license.
Okay, I was just wondering about the time. So I heard 2 years and 1 month, and I'm calculating 4 years. Is that, I didn't know if there was a difference.
Well, Ms. Early, the way that was calculated was I looked at the effective date of the probation, and then I ran it to either January or February 2016. And so
Okay.
that period of time would be approximately 2 years and 1 month.
Okay, and so since that time, you mentioned that Maximus is still having you supply samples? Is that-
No,
Okay.
Maximus is out of the picture.
Okay.
Because Maximus essentially released me. And so
And
I am doing
biological testing?
I am doing toxicology screening.
Okay.
I have been doing that since my release from Maximus. I believe in 2014 of February.
Okay.
The board stipulated I would do my quarterly reports, I would do my supervisory reports, I would
Gotcha.
continue with toxicology screening.
Okay.
I participated in over 74 toxicology screenings.
Okay.
The last time that I had anything to drink at all was June 21st, 2013. 3 days after our wedding anniversary on a Friday night at Scott's Seafood.
All right, so when was your last testing? Biological testing?
My last biological testing, if you can give me a moment.
Sure.
I have to power up this thing. I believe it was around the 1st or the 3rd of this month.
Okay. Of this month?
Of this month.
Okay. And you mentioned that you missed one test in 2015 due to, was that?
I
your-
missed one check-in date.
Check-in date,
On
and that-
August 5th, 2015.
And that was because your
But
dad's?
I was never selected for testing. I missed the check-in, but I
Okay.
wasn't selected for screening.
Okay.
And the reason I missed it is because in 2015 of May, on the 18th, we got a call from Ellen's folks down in Tucson. Her dad, who was 86, I think, at the time, had Alzheimer's. He passed away unexpectedly from complications surrounding some type of Alzheimer's issue. Several hours later, I got a call that my mother passed away. So we lost both parents.
I'm sorry.
So my memorial, or our memorial for her, had to be delayed. My wife had to leave town. She had religious commitments that she had to fulfill that necessitated her being in Tucson. So I never made it back.
I'm sorry to hear that. I just wanted to just make sure I have the dates
So
correct.
the reason I did not get the check-in is because I left Detroit with one leg to Minnesota, the second leg to Sacramento. I arrived, I believe, late afternoon or early evening, and I simply forgot.
Okay. And just a couple of next questions. I looked in your book, and then your last certification, was that in 2015, or did you recertify?
No, okay. So my certification expired in December of 2015. I have attempted 2 times to pass the PAN-RE. First time I didn't do so well. Second time I did better, but I'm still below the threshold that's acceptable for NCCPA certification.
Okay.
So I plan on taking it again,
Okay.
but the difficulty I'm having, of course, is post-stroke.
Okay.
Because there's some things that I'm having difficult with retention. Nonetheless, I'm going to attempt it again.
Okay. And since the time of your stroke, it seems like you're doing better. And you are currently fulfilling CME requirements and doing those things.
I think the last CME I attended was in 2016. I was in Las Vegas for the PAN-RE re-examination test classes. And so I don't think I've recorded that yet.
Okay. All right, that's all I have, and good luck on your honey-do list.
Thank you.
All right, I think Ms. Hazelton, you had raised your hand.
Yes, I have 2 questions. Can you share with us specific ways that your probation agreement limits or that you will think limit your return to work and ability to find work?
Yeah. One thing, there's many orthopedic surgeons that want to hire me. They have no qualms about it. In fact, ones that I've worked with for many, many years, some as long as 15 years, say if I ever left the practice, I would take you with me. It's pretty typical of someone in the PA profession who does an outstanding job. They understand the physician and are able to help with the patient. The blockade I'm going to run into, and I have run into, although I've never accepted a position because of the terms of probation, I'd have to have a supervising physician sign off, etc., is I'm running up against blocks on restaffing because they're seeing license, active, or probationary status. That's the block I'm running up against. Now, there's a couple of people out there that want to hire me, but I can't get past medical staff. The medical staff is saying, clear this up with the board. If this is cleared with the board, we will process your application. Everyone that's known me in my field, preceding these DUIs or even after the DUIs, know that I'm not an abuser of alcohol or toxic substances or recreational substances or whatever. I've never been that bad as a microbiologist or a med technologist. I've been in the healthcare field since 1975. So my job I take seriously. My position is something that I thoroughly enjoy as a PA. You know, I kept going to school until I found something. And I turned a position down at, it was either Yale or Wisconsin the year before because I wanted to go to Duke. And so they said, well, you need more ER, you need more volunteer experience. I did. I went out for that year and volunteered in the emergency room. The following years I was accepted. I did this by hard work. We didn't have internet back then. We didn't have access to the information we're able to gain now. We had to go to the library. We had to look at books. We had to find books. We had to find information. I did that because I was a good student, because I was committed on what I was doing. I'm one of 11 children. I'm the oldest. I have 7 sisters. I have 3 brothers. Excuse me. I worked my way to college. I, at the time, got $340 for my education, for my family. But the rest of the time, I went to school full-time, worked part-time. In the summer, I would work full-time, work part-time, go to school. part-time in the summer. I worked every year since 1971. I even brought my Social Security thing to see what I did. I worked every year, with the exception of 1982, when I was at the PA program. I made no discernible income because I couldn't do it. It would be impossible. I tried one year, and I would go to school all day, study in the evening.
Your Honor,
Go.
I don't mean to interrupt, but
Sorry.
I'm going to just object on relevancy grounds at this point.
Yeah, one thing, Mr. Ressler,
Yeah.
I agree with Mr. Hagan that
Okay.
it's kind of, we're veering off into an area that
Sorry.
isn't really relevant to what the board needs to decide.
I understand, Your
The
Honor.
board wants to hear information from you about why you think they should grant your petition to terminate probation. So
Okay.
you're starting to go way back in
Sorry.
history, and it might be interesting, but it
not
might
very-
not help them as much as if
Okay.
you focus more on some other topics.
Right, so in order for me to continue my passion as a PA, which I thoroughly enjoyed over the past 30-plus years, I need to have that clearance from this board. I need to have that active license. I don't need toxicology screening. Okay? If that's something that will assure the board, fine, but I would rather have the ability to go with my family, to go on vacation, to go maybe to Hawaii, where there might not be a site, and I'd have to fly to, Honolulu. You know, I've shown to this board over this period of time that I'm serious about attaining my license, getting it back without restriction. You know, I didn't work this hard just to say, okay, surrender it. You know, if that was the case, I would have done that back in August. That's not me. So, you know, carpe diem, and there's a whole other portion of that which states, you know, seize the moment. You know, you don't know what the future will bring. No one does.
Thank you. If I could ask one additional question, are there ways that you have exceeded the terms and the expectations of your probation agreement?
Exceeded the terms. Well, after all these evaluations, I went to one physician who I told what was going on and what the recommendations would be forthcoming from him. I also got that information from Dr. Grinstead also, and he had seen me twice. And basically, it's in sort of stress reduction techniques, you know. Have I done anything more than what the board would want? As far as the specific guidelines, as far as additional testing, no. As far as not providing additional reports, no, because I'm retired, so I give the reports that are absolutely necessary for this board. You know, I don't know of anything else.
Thank you.
Are there any other board members? Okay, Dr. Alexander?
Yeah, Mr. Russell. Mr. Russell, thank you for coming before the board to share your case. My question would be, given what you've gone through in the last who knows how many years, you mentioned that you want to retain your license or receive your license back for your personal good, your passion of being a PA.
Right.
Is there anything else you could share with us in terms of what you can contribute to the
I'm
PA?
sorry, what?
What you can contribute to the PA profession and the people of California?
Well,
for the lessons or the experiences that you've had over the last
well, of course, this
years.
experience, this experience has been humiliating, demeaning, but also a huge, steep learning curve. What can I contribute? You know, I've been asked by 2 places to teach. I think that I could contribute there for sure. You know, there's many people out there who still need joint replacements, who still need assistance that can effectively do what I do. And I do it very proficiently. I do it, I've done it almost of my life. Would that contribute to the profession? I would think that passing on information from older, younger generation may have some influence for them. They can learn from my mistakes. They can go forward from that, not just spin your wheels. Be proactive and go forward with that. So I'm 64. I still can move. I still can do some things. I'm doing it for the selfishness of myself to be able to perform that, but I do it most prominently for the benefit of my family. If I had a license that was restricted or was asked to be surrendered, then so would be it. However, I would still help my family.
Okay, thank you.
Any other board members who have any questions? Not seeing any. Mr. Sachs, any more from you?
No more from me, thank you.
Mr. Hagan, do you have any additional questions that you thought of after hearing this?
No, Your Honor.
Mr. Ressler, anything else you'd like to add now that you've been asked some questions?
No, I think, I hope that I remembered to say everything that I wanted to say, and I appreciate finally to be able to come before the board. It's been a long process. I appreciate Mr. Hagan's assistance in putting this together. I'm not an attorney. I appreciate Mr. Scher's continuation as a monitor. I also appreciate greatly Ms. Lynn Forsythe, who has been sort of my sounding block getting into the board. So I want to thank all of you, and I'm available. You have my information, you know where I live, you know my phone numbers, you have my email addresses. If any questions surface, come up, something you didn't ask, I'd be more than happy to bring that information to you or Your Honor, or even to Mr. Hagan also.
Okay, you're probably not going to get any phone calls.
Okay.
Mr. Hagan, did you want to make any closing remarks?
Yes, Your Honor. I would like to make a closing argument.
Go ahead.
Members of the board and everyone else who's present, the facts in this case are largely indisputed. In fact, in entering into a stipulated settlement, petitioner Mr. Ressler admitted to all the charges and the allegations in the accusation. The question that the board must now consider is whether petitioner's 7-year probation with effective date of November 27, 2013 should be terminated as requested by him. In answering this question, the board in general should consider and be mindful of the following, which I will discuss in further detail. First, that the burden of proof in this case is on petitioner to go ahead and establish that his probation should be terminated. Second, that petitioner engaged in serious misconduct by having 2 DUI convictions within a period of 22 months. I should say DUI arrest. Third, that petitioner has only been on probation for approximately 2 years and 1 month when one considers that his probation is tolling while the recommended minimum discipline for a conviction pursuant to the disciplinary guidelines is 5 years. Lastly, the board must also determine how much weight, if any, to give to petitioner's evidence of rehabilitation. So as far as the first point, the burden of proof being on petitioner, the established case law clearly provides that it is petitioner's burden to establish by clear and convincing evidence that his petition for termination of probation should be granted. In general, what this means is that petitioner must prove to the board that his petition should be granted, and in order to do so, he must present clear and convincing evidence that such action is justified. Clear and convincing evidence to a reasonable degree of certainty is more than a preponderance of the evidence as used in most civil matters, and less than beyond a reasonable doubt as used in criminal matters. As one court has described it, clear and convincing evidence requires a finding of high probability. The evidence must be so clear as to leave no substantial doubt, It must be sufficiently strong to command the unhesitating assent of every reasonable mind. That's the Christian Research Institute case, 2007, 148, Cal. 4th, 71 at page 84. The third point is that the nature, you must consider the nature and severity of petitioner's misconduct. As mentioned, he had his first DUI arrest in February 15, 2009. I'm not going to go through all the facts because they're in the record, but he was driving 50 miles per hour in a 25 mile per hour zone. He claimed he drank only 2 scotches, which I don't think he did admit today that he drank more than that. And his BAC, blood alcohol content, was 0.169, a very high number, more than twice the legal limit of 0.08%, which clearly put the public at risk with such a high BAC. And as mentioned, he was charged and convicted on that offense. The second DUI was also very disturbing. This occurred in Sacramento on December 30th, 2010, approximately 22 months later. And as mentioned, this was when petitioner drove to Starbucks with 3 young children in the car, and the employees of Starbucks were so concerned that they reported to the police because they were troubled about the fact he was intoxicated and he was driving in a car with small children. I would submit that based on the evidence in this case, petitioner made inconsistent statements about the amount he was drinking, and that's set forth in the record. As a result of that offense, he was sentenced to 45 days in jail, completed a multiple offender drinking driving program, had to pay various fines, assessments, and was placed on probation for 4 years. The courts have found that multiple DUI-related convictions are directly related to the practice of medicine. In one court, Griffiths v. Superior Court, 2002, 96, Cal. 4th, 757, the court held that multiple drunk driving convictions were substantially related to the practice of medicine. And in doing so, they noted that repeated convictions involving alcohol use reflect poorly on a medical professional's common sense and professional judgment, which are essential to the practice of medicine and tend to undermine public confidence in and respect for the medical profession. Similarly, in the case of Watson v. Superior Court, 2009, 176, Cal. 4th, 1407, the court also affirmed again that multiple DUI convictions are directly related to the practice of medicine. And as explained by the courts in Griffiths, driving while intoxicated or under the influence of alcohol demonstrates an inability or unwillingness to obey legal prohibitions against such conduct and constitutes a serious breach of duty owed to society. Knowledge of such repeated conduct by a physician, and particularly of its propensity to endanger members of the public, tends to undermine public confidence in and respect for the medical profession. Now, my other point is consideration, as I mentioned, of the length of time on probation. The board should consider how much time petitioner has actually served on probation when compared to the recommended timeframes in the disciplinary guidelines. To date, petitioner has effectively served approximately 2 years and 1 month on probation, and when one considers the effective date of his probation, November 27, 2013, and January 6, 2016, when he retired. The disciplinary guidelines, which is our Exhibit 13 at page 11, recommend a minimum penalty of stayed revocation and at least 5 years probation for a criminal conviction. In this case, petitioner had 2 DUI-related convictions in a period of 22 months. Lastly, the board can consider the rehabilitation factors and determine what weight, if any, to assign to them. And the rehabilitation factors are set forth in Title 16, the California Code of Regulations, at section 1360.2. One factor to be considered is the nature and severity of the acts and crimes. In this case, I would submit there were serious acts, as I mentioned, 2 DUIs within a 22-month period of time. In one case with a respondent driving 50 miles per hour in a 25 mile per hour zone, and his BAC being twice the legal limit. And the second offense, his BAC was 0.10%, and as mentioned, it was while he was driving with 3 young children in the car. The other factor the board can consider as far as rehabilitation is evidence of any subsequent acts. In this case, I've seen no evidence of any subsequent acts by Mr. Ressler. The court can also consider the elapsed time since the commission of the crimes or acts. And in this case, we have 8.5 years since the first DUI, approximately 8 years for the conviction on that DUI, and we have 6 years, 7 months on the second DUI, and then approximately 5 years and 4 months since the conviction on the second DUI. The court can also consider, pursuant to Title 16, Section 1360.2, whether or not the second conviction was expunged. And as I mentioned in my opening statement, there is evidence that the second conviction was expunged, but I want to point something out to the board. Just because the conviction was expunged, that does not mean we cannot consider the conviction at all. He's admitted to all the allegations in the accusation. They're deemed true and correct, and I would hope that the board, in considering this matter, will limit itself to only the evidence that's in the record, not anything else that's outside of the record. In conclusion, as mentioned, the misconduct in this case is undisputed. Petitioner was arrested 2 times within a span of 22 months for DUI offenses. This misconduct was clearly related to his practice of medicine because it demonstrates poor judgment, a disregard for the public safety, and his conduct reflected poorly on the medical profession. At this point, petitioner has only served a little over 2 years of the 7-year probationary period. And with that said, I will now submit this matter to the board to consider whether petitioner has met his burden of proving by clear and convincing evidence that his petition for termination of probation should be granted. Thank you.
Mr. Ressler, did you want to make a closing remark?
Could I just say something?
Go. Yes, you may.
You know, Mr. Hagan talks about a 45-day incarceration, which never happened. So just so that the record is clear, I never spent 45 days in any correctional facility at all.
Okay, anything else?
I spent 4 days in a correctional facility, which I don't plan ever on repeating. But that was the only thing I could hear. The second thing is I think there's ample evidence submitted, at least within the exhibits that have been presented to this board, and to your honor, that show that I've never had any prior history of alcohol abuse or substance abuse, and most importantly, never with any patient ever at any time. And those are letters that have been dated, those are letters that are forthcoming from my supervising physician and my mentor.
What do you mean they're forthcoming? They're in the documents
They
that
are.
you submitted, right?
They
with
are
your
the
petition?
documents that are in the petition that have been submitted already, Your Honor.
All right.
Your Honor, if I could just add one thing for the board's attention.
Yes, go ahead.
When I came up with the 45-day amount, I took that from the probationary documents, and I'll direct the court's attention to exhibit number 10 at page AGO-545. I'm going off what's on this particular document, was in the board's file, and you know, as far as Mr. Ressler saying he only served 4 days, I don't have anything to dispute that, but at least the order of informal probation and minute order indicates 45 days, and that's number 7.
Okay. Mr. Ressler, was there anything else you wanted to add?
Just I understand what Mr. Hagan is saying, and what the actual fact was a 4-day incarceration at Consumes Regional Center. I believe it's in Elk Grove. But otherwise, I understand.
All right, but did you want to make any closing remarks other than that?
I don't have anything that I can specifically say other than I've done the best that I can to present to the board the information that I know as I understand it. I would hope that the board will look upon this as a step in the right direction and allow me to have an active license that I can go forward from. And I appreciate all your time and your patience from everyone.
Okay.
Well, then, the case is submitted. The board will determine what its action will be on your petition in closed session. And sir, you will receive a written decision in the mail. So, the court reporter, we can go off the record. And now I'm going to give the court reporter some forms. Then Mr. Ressler and Mr. Hagan, you need to get copies of these, and then the protective order that I signed, you need to get copies before you leave, okay? But Mr.
Absolutely.
Sachs, did you want to call a break?
Yes, we'll take a 10-minute break before we go back into closed session to consider this case and other disciplinary matters. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Okay, so we are going to go to item number 9, Education Workforce Development Advisory Committee update. Mr. Grant and Dr. Alexander.
Okay, so hopefully you guys have the items in the packet. The first one that we'll go over is the PA program status in California, and this is as of a couple of days ago. This is a change from the last time we talked, so several programs have been approved. Oh, here we go. So there are 14 programs in California, and there's one that's developing for a total of 15. Many of those have been, the ones that you see on this first page here that say provisional, those are all new programs that are in the first few classes of opening. So we've had a lot of new programs open in California. And there's still one that is developing. They have a planned cohort of 20. And so I think in the next year or so, they should be getting ready to ramp up. There's one program on probation. There's a variety of reasons a program could be on probation. And that is not especially alarming, depending on, it can be an administrative item or anything else, but it is something to monitor and be aware of. The more important document is the next one that has all the lines on it. Looks like this. So there are 250 PA programs in the United States. The number this morning from the presentation was accredited programs. This number includes programs that are developing, so we're at 250. In California, we have accredited operating programs, 14, with one that is in the works. The color didn't show up on the copies, but basically we have 9 programs in the Los Angeles area, 4 programs in the Bay Area, and 2 in the Sacramento area. And the programs in the Sacramento area have a pretty good focus on the Central Valley and Northern California, which is a rural area that is underserved. The average cost, you can see the costs for the different programs. There's a pretty wide variance, but on average, if you average them, the cost is $101,533, which is a significant expenditure. All of these programs are graduate degree programs that offer master's degrees. There are, right now, if every program is filled to capacity, and just judging on my experience where I work, we have about 40 to 50 applicants for every seat in the program, so I would bet that they're all operating at capacity. We can graduate 603 new PAs in California every year. And when the one developing program comes online, if they stay at 20, which is what their documentation says now, then there will be 623 graduates a year entering the workforce in California just from California programs. We can get a lot of graduates from other places, and so this at least gives us an idea of what kind of workforce we have growing within the state. And we know that people that train here tend to stay here, people that are from here and go to school here tend to stay here. So that's just kind of where we are and what's coming down the pipe in terms of PA programs. We got a lot of those programs were accredited, which is a big job. For the programs to get accredited, there's many requirements and it's a rigorous process. So I think it's heartening that so many programs were able to be accredited and successful.
Anything to add? Dr. Alexander?
You did a great job.
Thanks.
I'd like to add something. Along with that, your numbers may be increased because each year past the provisional year, you can add additional students. So you might have classes that are even larger than your numbers. And then just the current accredited PA programs of 14 includes provisionally accredited as well. So, but the numbers can get even larger.
The, during provisional accreditations, programs can't add seats, and then after that, it's up to the accrediting body. So it is not a quick or easy process to add seats to the program, but it depends on what their plan is. So you're right, it can change year to year.
And I can tell you, on an undergraduate level, it's the fastest growing programs, or at least fastest growing interest in health professions programs among undergrads. And so look for more increased applicants per space.
So they have bachelor's in?
They have bachelor's moving into.
Yeah, these are all graduate degrees, they're all master's level degrees programs.
I find it interesting that there are no programs down here in the San Diego area. Never has been. I mean, Orange County is about as far south as they go. Don't know why. But this is strong work. Really gives us a good picture. Further comments?
I
Public
have
comment? I'm sorry.
The naturopaths are in San Diego, so that could have something to do with it.
Public?
Nobody gets sick here.
There isn't any public. They got tired, they're eating lunch.
That's true.
Okay, we will go to changing the October 16th meeting date. Lynn?
Currently, our meeting date in October is set for Monday, the 16th, and Julie actually kind of stumbled upon this. Between this meeting and that meeting, we're barely over 8 weeks. So what we would like to do is kind of stretch it out and either move it to Monday, October 30th or Monday, November 6th. The medical board's current meeting for October is scheduled for October 26th and 27th. And then I have the schedule for their meetings for next year as well. In the past, we've always kind of followed their board meetings, and somehow this year we're in front of them. So does anybody have any objections, or are those 2 dates workable for anybody, or?
November 6th is better.
Me too.
Yeah, November, because October's busy.
As I told you, November is a nightmare
I know,
for me.
I know it is, but
I've got 3 separate trials.
November's good for me.
Either one's fun for me.
November 6th, or what was the other date? October 30th?
October 30th.
That's better for me, but I could do both.
I can do both. I was beginning back in Mexico.
It has to go through the board president.
And I think he's leaning towards the 30th, to be honest.
The only other thing I would note is just that a lot of organizations will take off the Friday of that week for Veterans Day, so November 10th. And so it might be a really short week for folks if we have a meeting on November 6th, 3 days of work, and then a day off. Might just end up working better for folks if we did it a different week.
So, November 6th?
October 30th?
October 30th or November 6th?
Yeah.
I would prefer October 30th.
So do I hear a motion from somebody to move it?
Sure, I'll make a motion. To move the October meeting from the 16th to the 30th?
I'll second it.
Discussion?
That'll be in.
Public comment?
It's in.
Well, it's public comment back, okay. How was lunch? Okay, I will call the vote. Dr. Alexander?
Say aye.
Jennifer Calquist?
Aye.
Sonia Early?
Aye.
Javier Escobar Acosta?
Aye.
Jed Grant?
Aye.
Catherine Hazelton?
Aye.
Xavier Martinez.
Aye.
Robert Sachs, aye. Mary Valencia.
Aye.
Okay, motion carries. We will meet on October 30th. Next item on the agenda is the director's update. Do you have anything?
I don't. Did you get anything from the director?
I just got the email which apologized from Christine Lally that she would be unable to attend our meeting.
So, no report then.
Okay, no report. Next item is number 12, regulations, update, discussion, possible action.
Well, yeah, the chart is there, the summary is in here, yes. Anita prepared a summary of the current regulations that the staff is that they are working on. We currently have 7 regulations that are in the process. 1399.545, we are going to take back to the office as Christy is just coming back on board, so we're going to be working on the language on that one. The rest of them are in various stages at DCA moving forward. And the only other one that came back was 1399.617. But looking at it, you want to?
Sorry, 573 also came back.
Okay.
So 1399.573, the citations for unlicensed practice, that would be item number 12F. So agency had some concerns with the language, which we were able to resolve, but they want us to amend the initial statement of reasons. It's sort of like a term paper. It's an explanation of why the issue, why you're correcting the regulation, why you're amending it, and what public protection issue you're advancing in amending that regulation. And they didn't feel like it was explanatory enough, so we're going to work on revising that, and I hope to have that package done next week so we can file it. So we have approval to move forward with filing that package. I just need to fix that initial statement of reasons and work with staff on that one. Then
617.
I'm not sure, I haven't actually seen that language yet. So the audit and sanctions for non-compliance, I have not seen that.
It's, the revised language is in the, right there, right underneath that chart.
Oh, you're talking about, oh, I'm sorry, that's the certifying, that's, it confused me. The description on the chart is not what we're doing. So, okay, so I mean, you have the language in front of you, and the options for the board are to initiate a rulemaking, or maybe perhaps table it until we have a nationally recognized certifying agency. So the concerns we discussed earlier today, I will just state I've already mentioned. So, you know, my recommendation would be to wait until you get that other nationally recognized certifying agency before you try to amend this regulation. But it's your call, and you have the motion language if they want to initiate the rulemaking. Any questions? I can go again. Any questions? These are funny. Any questions or?
I don't know why that last paragraph, right after completion of documentation, where it says when a physician assistant applies.
Are you looking at a specific subdivision?
Yeah, well,
Is that subdivision E that you're looking at the bottom?
yes, yeah.
Okay.
I don't even know
Any
why that.
physician assistant who applies for renewal pays all applicable fees, and a result of an audit is either found to not have completed the number of hours of approved CE, required or found not to hold a valid certification from the National Commission on Certification of Physician Assistants or another nationally recognized certifying agency at the time of renewal may have his or her license placed in inactive status until such time as the completion of deficient hours is documented to the board.
I don't think we need the other nationals to be even in that. It's a different thing that we're talking about.
Okay.
So do you want to have us take it back and,
Yes,
okay.
if the rest of the board.
So you're gonna take that other nationally certified, nationally recognized certifying agency out of the
Subdivision
renewal-
E.
Subdivision E? E, is that E 2, 3?
E2, there's a 1 at the beginning if you look at the.
Well, then there's a 3 too, right?
I don't see a 3 in there.
Right here? Am I looking in the wrong spot?
We're looking at the bottom.
Oh,
We're looking at
okay,
the
got it, okay.
We're going to,
E2.
I've
it's
got
a
it, yeah, it
really
looks
tiny,
the
it
symbol
looks
on
like
there.
a GE or something.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's the C struck out. When you're revising an existing text, they make you provide a copy to them showing underline and strike out what you're adding and deleting. So sometimes it bleeds together on the page, but what I read to you would be the proposed amendment.
Are you looking for a motion?
Yes.
A motion to remove the other agency
Yeah.
language?
Yeah, because that doesn't apply to CME renewal.
Well,
I mean, it would if there was another national.
right, so this runs into the same issue we talked about this morning.
Exactly. I mean, like, we could leave it in, I guess, but it's kind of redundant.
Well, are they gonna kick it back if we leave it in?
That would be what I think would happen, because there isn't another nationally recognized certifying agency at this point. Because this is, I mean, you still have another reg that allows for other continuing education providers, including AAPA, is that
Mhm.
correct? They're recognized in your other regulations.
So we don't really need it?
I
It's
don't
just
think so.
Okay, I'll move to remove that language.
Do you want to make the other changes to the regulation, or are you?
The last part there?
Well, there's some other underlined text. You can see, for instance, that we've added any physician assistant who fails to respond to the board's written notification of audit within the time requested shall be issued a citation, order of abatement, and administrative fine of $500, and/or shall be subject to disciplinary action. So there's that kind of stuff, and I just don't know. I wasn't here, so I don't know whether you feel like that needs to be changed right now, or you want to wait on the certifying agency issue to a later date.
I guess it's just really hard for me to follow what this document really says, because there's so much extra
Okay,
stuff in it.
why don't we bring this back to you with a more thorough explanation of the changes and why the staff is suggesting them? That way you can make a more informed decision. Typically, with regulation packages, we recommend that we have a memo that accompanies the package, explains why you're looking at it, what issue caused the changes to be made to this document, and then explains each subdivision change in a summary format. And then gives you your options for what to do with the regulation package. So we can do that for the next board meeting.
Yeah,
That work?
That would work
Okay.
great, thank you.
Okay,
And we don't need to vote on that.
no.
Okay.
Oh, do you want public comment?
Public comment? Okay, so now we move on to,
Developments. I think it's item 13.
okay, we're done with all the regs?
I believe so,
Yes,
unless
we are.
somebody has questions on any of the other packages that are all in various stages of review.
Okay. And,
If it's all right, I would just like to thank the staff. At the last meeting, we asked for this
Yes,
summary
you did.
matrix, and,
It's a lot of
want-
information.
It is, and I want to thank the staff for putting it together,
Yeah,
because it's
really
very
helpful.
helpful.
Yeah. Okay, so we will go to item 13, developments since the February 2015 United States Supreme Court decision in North Carolina. State Dental Board, Federal Trade Commission. Christie.
So, in March, the Federal Trade Commission announced that it was creating an Economic Liberty Task Force. And that task force was really designed to examine and review major issues affecting, resulting from this Supreme Court decision. And also to examine ways for helping boards in various states address competition issues. And they have developed this task force, and the first meeting was held July 27th, 2017 in Washington, D.C., and it was to highlight approaches that make it easier for workers in state licensed occupations to offer their services across state lines or move between states. So the first meeting was dealing with the portability issue that I think was brought up at the presentation this morning, and the various topics that were discussed at that roundtable included barriers to entry raised by cross-state occupational licensing requirements, the laws of interstate compacts, licensing portability mechanisms, the status and effectiveness of interstate licensing compacts, state-based initiatives to improve the portability of licenses held by military service members and their spouses, and the potential impact of portability measures on licensee mobility, market entry, provider supply, and competition. So there was a lot talked about at that meeting, and they plan on having further roundtables, and I think it's important to track it, and I've signed up for email notifications regarding their roundtables, just to see what kind of recommendations come out of those roundtable discussions, because they could end up in federal legislation. They could come to our state by way of further legislative proposals or actions, and I think it's a good idea to kind of keep an eye on that. So I'll be doing that and reporting if I see anything. Any questions? I'm done.
Public comment? Okay, next item, Medical Board of California report. Do you have anything?
No.
No,
I don't,
okay.
no one gave me any.
So,
There's no report.
as everybody notices here, that Dr. Bishop is not here. Unfortunately, when he retired from University of San Diego, that was an academic position, and the position that he held on the medical board was a physician in academic medicine, and so as a result, he was not reappointed by the governor's office, and subsequently can no longer serve on our board. Ironic that this happens the first time after 10 years that we have a meeting in San Diego. So I have directed staff that we will send him kind of a commendation letter recognizing all of his service to our board, to the state, and he was very gracious in the last year when, besides everything else that happened to him, he couldn't vote anymore, which was just insane. We are waiting for the governor's office to appoint a new physician member from the medical board. We don't know how soon that's going to happen. Unfortunately, that individual also will not be allowed to vote. It will be ex officio. But Dr. Bishop did some great things for us. He was a wonderful advocate for us in front of the medical board, and he will be missed. And I hope you're watching it, Mike. Okay, so going on to item 15, Legislative Committee report.
Yes. Well, the legislature has made this very easy for us because most of the bills are not moving forward this year. So there were 4 bills at the last meeting for which the board voted to send a letter, either a letter recommending changes or a letter of support. None of those 4 bills is moving forward. And I should note that all of those are in the summary with one exception. 8710 is another one where we sent a letter with suggestions. This was the one that would require all boards to meet in rural Northern California every other year. And we sent some suggestions about defining what rural means and taking Northern out of the bill. But that bill's not moving forward.
So of all of the bills that we have looked at this year, there are only 3 that continue to move forward. So I'll just briefly go over those. One is AB 40, and this is probably the one of greatest relevance. This is the one that would make it easier for PAs and other medical professionals to access cures by allowing for the integration of cures information into existing software that is used, or the creation of new software that integrates both. There have been a few changes to the bill since we last saw it, but in effect, it's basically the same in that it would simplify PA compliance with cures and integrate the software. There were some issues about privacy. There have been a number of amendments to the bill to make the privacy protection stronger. So that bill remains on track for potential passage. The next bill that continues to move on is AB 44. We didn't spend a lot of time on this last time because we determined that it's less germane to our mission than others. It's about making it easier to receive workers' comp after domestic terrorism, which could potentially affect PAs, but hopefully that will not happen. And then the last is AB 508, which we don't think it would really affect this board. It would repeal any existing authority that we have or any other licensing board has to cite and fine a practitioner for being in default of their federal education loans. As far as staff knows, that's nothing that this board has ever done. It's not something we regularly check, so it really doesn't affect our board. And that is it with what continues to move forward. Can I answer any questions on any of those? First from the board, and then I'll see if the public has any comments or questions.
I have a general question. Knowing that you won't be here next year, legislators are out in September, how do we determine which bills we actually review?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I should note that Mary did half of this, and Mary and I have been talking about this all year, and she is fully engaged and has an extensive background with legislation, and is eager to continue on with this.
Some hard shoes to fill. Thank you so much.
Oh, well, I'm happy to do it. So as far as how we get the bills identified to us, that comes entirely from the staff. And the primary source is DCA, but I know that Lynn is in contact with CAPA and other allies and colleagues in this field, I should say. And she sends us the list. Do you want to add anything to that, Lynn?
No, you've pretty well covered it. That's how we find these bills.
Thank you.
Uh-huh.
Okay, public comment or?
I know.
Any thoughts? No? All right.
So that SB 554, that's the buprenorphine prescription one, that one's going nowhere then?
Let's see. Do you remember that one? Do you think you looked at that one? Oh.
It's at the end.
Huh. We don't have it here.
I thought it was in here.
Maybe we didn't look
No, it's
at
right,
it.
it is 554, it's right here.
Did you say SB or AB?
SB 554, it's on, towards the end of the packet. That will allow physician assistants to dispense that, it's sort of like naloxone, it's a Schedule III drug.
It's Suboxone.
Yeah, it's Suboxone.
Suboxone. No, it's like it. Isn't it a combo of naloxone and another drug?
No, I think it's just buprenorphine, which is there's no Narcan in it. For naloxone.
Okay, but it's used for the same, to help people that have opioid addiction, right?
Narcan or naloxone is a reversal.
Right, okay, so that's not a reversal agent then. Okay. But in any event, it would allow it without advance approval from the physician, and I was just wondering where that was.
We didn't look at that one, but I can look it up and find it. I don't know what happened to that one, if there was a difference between if it was referred between the last meeting and this meeting, and so it got missed. But if you want to give me a minute, I can come back to it and tell you where it is. Oh, you did?
Yeah, I've got it. Okay, go ahead. Just so this is in Senate concurrence and Assembly when it's pending.
Oh.
But if it's already a concurrent.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it clearly moved and it's almost ready to go to the governor at this point.
Okay. Because that would be a huge change to our Practice Act.
Uh-huh.
So I just want to make sure
Okay.
that everybody knows about it.
Right, yeah.
Okay.
Can you briefly go through that one again? What's the key points on that one?
It's for opioid treatment, allowing PAs and NPs to prescribe Suboxone.
Well, right now you need an advanced license to prescribe as an MP, you need a special
Yeah,
class.
special class,
I would
yeah.
be surprised if, I mean, I don't know, maybe they will.
It looks like it's going through, so that's why I just want to make sure, because right now you have to have need advance approval unless you've taken that education course. So this would change it, so you wouldn't have to take that education course or get advance approval.
I don't think that's what we do.
No, if this is a whole different class of drug that even some physicians can't write. It's a very specialized drug that only addiction medicine doctors can
Right, but it
prescribe.
says neither this chapter nor any provision of law shall be construed to prohibit a physician assistant from administering or providing buprenorphine to a patient or transmitting orally in writing on a patient's record or in a drug order in order to a person who lawfully furnished buprenorphine when done in compliance with the Comprehensive Addiction Recovery Act, including the following, including the requirement that physicians complete not fewer than 24 hours of initial training. So it would change it from our statutory requirements to these right here, and then you wouldn't need advance approval. Because it currently, under our statute, you didn't need advance approval.
I don't think we can prescribe it all right now. And that 24 hours that you're talking about, I don't think is the controlled substance course that we take. That's only like 8 hours. This is a special on top of everything else thing. But it's
Right.
okay. We
But
don't need
this
to-
law would allow it, is my point.
Yeah. That's,
This law change.
Well, interesting to keep an eye on that, so.
My point is if it goes through, that you should be aware of it.
Yeah.
Thank you for catching
Okay?
it.
Public comment?
There's orders.
Hello. Is this on? Okay. If SB 554, we did support, and it basically aligns federal and state laws around buprenorphine. And I mean, it's.
So it would remove the restrictions we have to align it with this act, the federal law.
Yes, to some degree, but and it is. I mean, it's faced no opposition. It's definitely looking really good. It's going to the governor's office. So I think that, well, at least no opposition that I've seen. We like it.
Right, I just wanted them to be aware that it would change the state law relative to this type of drug. That's what I was just trying to make sure they were aware of. Okay?
All right. Item number 16, agenda items for the next meeting, which will now be 10:30.
October 30th. I would ask that Senate Bill 244, if it goes through, be placed on the next agenda. Or if it's still- Senate Bill 244 is a bill that prohibits state agencies from sharing personal information they collect during the course of licensure with any other agencies. And that's kind of a concern of mine, that you can't share under that bill proposal. It's sponsored by the ACLU. So, in any event, it's unclear whether that bill's going to move forward at this point. It might, and if it does, I'd like you to be aware of it, so. Senate bill-
Restrict our ability to share information.
Yeah, right now, under current California law, you can share information with other state regulatory and law enforcement agencies, but this would not allow it. I think it's in response to certain issues regarding immigration state right now, so. But in any event, I don't know if it'll go through, but it's still moving from what I can see, so just want to make sure you're aware of it.
We referred to Committee on Appropriations, it's back in approach, so.
Yep, so, okay, thank you.
Okay, other items?
Yeah, could we look at, just to add to the agenda, BNP 3517? Since we couldn't
do a regulatory change, maybe we can look at language change to that section.
Sure.
Ken? Can we get a really decent financial report for?
Yes. Yes, month 13 will be completed by then, and since we will be in Sacramento, we'll have, hopefully, we will be able to have budgets there.
Or probably be in San Diego. Okay. All of the standard things, medical board, or medical board activities, North Carolina, elections.
DCA report?
Yeah.
Yes.
Do we have any plans to meet elsewhere besides Sacramento in this coming year, or this?
We normally hold 3 meetings in Sacramento and 1 in Southern. Do you have any preference, or?
Just asking.
Yeah. I can tell you, Lynn and I and Julie and Rosanna probably spent over 350 hours to get this meeting here. Oh, we could have won the war in Iran easier. We had a horrible time with contracting, and finally we said, the medical board needs here, pull out their contract. It was unbelievable. And we've done a very rough estimate. This meeting in San Diego cost us about $8,000 more than if we had met in Sacramento.
Though it does have us in compliance with state law.
Yes, and you're right. So what we're looking at for next year is maybe do LAX, Hilton, down in that area.
A lot of boards meet there.
Yeah, and so we're gonna come up with some sort of a different location, but obviously we'll have to have one down here.
So has the budget been adjusted to reflect the need to have these meetings in the location so that the cost is somewhat?
Not yet.
We can talk about that at a future meeting.
Yes, we can.
You might want to put that on there for, meeting locations, discussion for next board meeting, because you're going to be setting the next board meeting schedule next time anyway.
Can we do that then? Put that on?
Yeah, sure.
I have a question.
Yes.
Where is Kappa holding their next meeting?
Here, well, it'll be happening here.
Because it was nice to see a lot of people.
Yeah,
nodding.
exactly.
Yes, it was.
That was.
Well,
I
that
like
was
that
all,
interaction.
that was the reason we did it today, and we got the word out. I made an announcement yesterday, and it was in their newsletter, so, we had a pretty good turnout. We had to bring extra chairs. I can tell you, in my 22 years on the board, we've never had to bring extra chairs.
From my perspective, I'd also like to
Good to have
thank
it on.
Kappa, Gay and her entire crew. They bent over backwards to assist us to get this meeting together, to get the room that we needed. The staff at this hotel has been phenomenal with all of us, so I would really like to thank them.
And thank you, Bryce, for making us loud and thin.
That costs extra.
Special, Lynn.
And San Diego's a great place to do that.
It is.
Yeah. You like this location?
Well, I think Kappa is gonna be here for a couple more years, so here comes public comment.
Yes, we do have a 3-year contract for a conference here at this hotel, and it will be in August. Love to have you.
Anything else? Everybody hungry?
Okay.
All right. I will make a motion that we adjourn the physician assistant board meeting in San Diego. Thank you very much. Appreciate everybody's attendance and not eating.